So does the little ones.
Just
Did you talk to KUNC at all last week?
KUNC?
Yeah. You busy yet?
No, I checked with them.
Yeah, that sounds
I
great.
didn't hear it on the radio, but I saw they had the text right up. They quoted well and stuff.
Ordinance 1336, and that's oil and gas. I will, though there's not a sign up, I will open that up for public comment. So we'll move those down to that section. Thank you for showing up. Alright. Ready? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for March 12th, 2024. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karspeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Here.
Trustee Albrecht will be absent this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, clerk. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone in the audience to speak to anything that's not on tonight's agenda. Looks like one might be, and I'll allow that right now. We'll start off with Leslie Tassie. And Leslie, I know you know the drill, but if you could please come to the front, state your name and address, and keep your
Yes.
comment to 3 or less. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Leslie Tassie. I live at 945 North 4th Street here in Berthoud. I just have a quick question, basically. I was wondering if there's, can I show this to you?
Sure.
This is on 4th Street, just after you turn off Mountain Avenue. It's next to Berthoud Pizza. I just wondered, that's been there as long as I've lived here, which is almost 12 years now. I just wondered, what's the deal with that? Isn't there some kind of ordinance that could apply to that mess that's there? I think it's really embarrassing for the town that it's right in the middle of town, and it's been there forever, and it's really a huge eyesore. The other one that I just like to comment on is that rusty derelict sign that's on the corner of 4th and Mountain on the southeast side there by Panther, right on the corner at the intersection. That's an eyesore too. This town is so cute, and people are always telling me what a cute town this is, but it's a little embarrassing to me if I bring a friend into town and, I drive past on my way, because I live on 4th Street, on my way to my house, driving past those eyesores. So just wanted to comment about, wondering if they're.
Thank you. Do you mind handing that over to Administrator Kirk or Clerk some more, that picture? Leslie, I don't know if they know what you're talking about. Just wanted to hand it over to staff. I'll hand it over to Administrator Kirk if we have any blight. I mean, I know we had something for fencing in abandoned vehicles, but
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of what Ms. Tassie is referring to, but certainly something we can look into. Our code enforcement officer, neighborhood services officer, Teresa, handles complaints pretty much all day, every day about various code enforcement issues, and she's obviously trying to be proactive as well. We are hiring, as you know, we budgeted to hire a second neighborhood services officer to help take on some of these tasks. So, but yeah, I don't have any information about the specific issue that's being raised tonight.
okay. Thank you, Ms. Tassie. We'll look into that. Next is, oh, shit, please, go ahead.
Yeah.
Trustee Ayers.
So I've asked a couple times about the sign there at Panthers, because it's some sort of like strange, Panthers doesn't own it, but the landowner does. Is there any way, or is that sign any sort of, I guess, pseudo-historical monument? Cause I assume it's like from the 50s, or when it used to be a movie theater.
Grocery store
Grocery store.
and bakery.
Okay. Is there any way, or has staff approached the owner of the property as to whether or not the town could either take it over, or if they could, I guess, ask Panthers to use it so that it isn't just sort of this vacant, empty steel and plastic?
I think the answer to both of those questions is probably no. We haven't asked them if the town could take it over, and we haven't asked them if Panthers could use it. I know when it's come up in the past, there's been a general resistance to have it taken down because it does kind of have that, the potential to have kind of a historical feel. It obviously looks like a derelict, rusty sign. I think that's a fair description, but we haven't pressed to have it taken, the frame removed, or put into use.
I do have an address, spoken to her about it. I could answer.
Go ahead.
Because I questioned her about it at one point, asking her if there was any issues or problems with it. I did talk to her. She stated that she does have an active permit. She's spent money upgrading and maintaining and repairing the electrical in it apparently. But when she got sign quotes, it was more money than she was willing to spend. I told her about the facade grant and other grants that we have in town that could help offset that. So I don't know if she's moved forward since that conversation to talk to Walt about maybe get some financial assistance with replacing the sign. She does intend to fix it up, but it's money right now that's kind of stopping her on there, so.
She's not talked to Walt that I'm aware of, but
Okay.
that's certainly something he can reach out and just see if there's an opportunity through our sign grant program to help push that
But
along.
that's what I'm aware of, is it's a financial thing right now.
Thanks, Ms. Tassi, for bringing that up. Next is Len Goldfinning.
We each signed up individually, would like to combine.
You can combine them, sure.
Thank you. Good evening, I am Len Goldenfinnig.
And I'm Amber Goldenfinnig, and we live at 1000 Lake Avenue.
We are here to put some faces to your executive session topic. Our lives have been turned upside down due to the situation. Our home, finances, our health, and our marriage are all affected. We are financially and emotionally bankrupt because of the town. We understand in the executive session, you will be provided our detailed letter we sent to the town. We ask each of you to consider 2 points when you review our letter. Please write down these 2 points. One, put yourself in our shoes. And two, how would you want to be treated? Putting yourselves in our shoes, how would you feel if it was your house, your lives affected as we have been for several years? Having the town fully aware of the issue, but repeatedly dismissing and ignoring your pleas for almost a year, what would you do? I bet you would hire a lawyer too. I bet you would hire an engineer and a leak detector to get to the bottom of it. How would you want to be treated if you were going through what we had to go through? In the letter, note the actions we were forced to take because the town would not. We sought and paid for evidence of the issue because the town neglected its duties. We commend Chris and Jeremy for taking action, albeit a very slow HR process. They knew we were wronged and they terminated a town official. While that was good for the town, didn't do anything for us. Nothing regarding the damage to our home and our lives. We really appreciate that Chris is discussing our situation with you tonight. Tells me he cares, agrees we were wronged, and wants to do the right thing. There are likely varying opinions of the notification and liability. The town agrees they were properly notified with their action of filing a CIRSA claim. That is something I'm confident they do not do fraudulently or without merit. We hope you work to resolve this issue without further litigation. That would be costly to both sides. And increase costs unnecessarily to Berthoud taxpayers. To be clear, it's not a windfall. We're just asking you to right a wrong. We just wanted to come here so you know that we are more than a letter or a topic of discussion. Many of you may not know that I served as chair of the port committee for over 4 years. We are Berthoud residents, active members of the Berthoud community, and we're your neighbors.
I hope that you try to grasp how horrible this has been for us to live through for several years. Please do the right thing to put this behind us all as soon as possible. Thank you.
We're available for any questions you may have, and participate in any discussions you deem appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think this being covered under an executive session, we probably can't have a conversation. Thank you very much for showing up.
Understood. I would just want to put faces to the
Absolutely.
situation.
Thank you both. Okay, the rest of the signups are regarding ordinance 1336, which is oil and gas. And thank you for showing up as well. And I'll open that section up for public comment when the agenda item arises. So we can move on now to consent. Do you trustees have anything they'd like to remove from consent? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right. Trustee Kurtz has moved to approve consent. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. Next on our agenda is the Arbor Day proclamation, and this will be introduced by our town forester, Paul Furness. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for showing up.
Thanks for having me.
I should say Forester Furness.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up.
So April's coming right around the corner. We got Arbor Day coming up, so I'm just kind of informing you when we're planning on hosting Arbor Day this year, hoping we can get that solidified and kind of moving forward with that. We've been working hard with the tree advisory committee, trying to kind of bolster attendance this year and just get more people interested in Arbor Day in the town. So we were looking at Saturday, April 27th at Vine Park. Unfortunately, we had to remove a tree there. We're just planning on replacing a tree. A little background, Berthoud is a Tree City USA and we have been for the last 41 years. The requirements met is we have an established tree board. We have at least more than $2 per capita budget in forestry. We always, or at least for the past 41 years, have observed Arbor Day as a town, and we have a tree care ordinance. So we're looking good, at least for Tree City USA going forward. And there will obviously be a raffle, as we have done in the past, and hopefully like prizes for kids who join our poster contest. So yeah, just April 27th at Vine Park, 10 a.m. Refreshments will be available. This year we're planning on planting a common hackberry. So I think you have a copy of the
I do. I have a copy of the
proclamation.
proclamation, and it's tradition that we read this aloud. And before I do, I just want to thank you for all your hard work, and Trustee Murphy as liaison, and we have Lynn in the crowd too, a member, and you guys are really doing outstanding work, particularly you, Mr. Furness. So I really appreciate having you on board and leading this up. So I'll go ahead and read this. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And Arbor Day is now observed throughout the United States and the world, and trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And trees in our town increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And Clerk, do you want me to, oh yeah, here we go. And we got 2 different dates on here. Now therefore, nope, we got it right, sorry. Now therefore, I, William Karsnick, Mayor of the Town of Berthoud, do hereby proclaim Saturday, April 27th, 2024 as Arbor Day in the Town of Berthoud, given under my hand in these free United States in the Town of Berthoud on this 12th day of March 2024, and to which I have caused the seal of the Town of Berthoud to be affixed and have made this proclamation public. I'll go ahead and sign this. Excellent, thank you very much. I'll hand this over to the clerk. Do you want this, or should I give it to the clerk?
Yeah.
I'll give it to Christian. Okay, thanks very much. I'm excited to be there.
Yep.
You and I last year, right? Okay, next on our agenda are general code amendments, and this will be introduced by our town community development director, Ann Johnson.
So I'd like to speak up on this a little bit.
Sure.
I'll bring to attention, I've got a print shop in town. Anybody have any concerns with me having a possible conflict of interest, let me know. I'd like to stay and participate. I feel like I've got good insight and contribution.
I think that's to me totally appropriate. I think a lot of this, you have a lot of insight on this.
Okay.
No personal issue.
Good evening, Mayor Karspeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees. So tonight, different than a land use hearing that comes before you, this is a code amendment. And for the members of the audience that might not be familiar with the code amendment process, staff will give a presentation, then there will be a public hearing, and then there will be discussion and voting by you all after you close the public hearing. Before you tonight, there are 4 main sections of amendment in the sign code, and those are included on this slide. One is a major change to the definition section, and the major change is instead of having all of the signs called out by, X type of sign, it's all sign, comma, what the sign is. So they're all grouped together and it's easy to find things. Also, illumination will include halo lighting. It is not the same as direct, it's a way to illuminate that is backwards. So we went ahead and added that in. And then just renumbering all of the definitions so that they're in sequential order. The next part is in the zoning section. Because we were opening it up to sign codes, we went ahead and just corrected the spelling of 2 words. One is facade and one is drive-through. And then we're moving all regulations regarding signs from the zoning section on the Mountain Avenue Overlay District to the actual sign section itself. What staff was finding is that if somebody was in the Mountain Avenue Overlay, we would go to the sign code section and then we'd also have to flip to the Mountain Avenue Overlay section. So we're just combining it all so it makes it easy. Excuse me. Then in section 30-102J, just for content neutrality, we cannot call a construction site sign a construction site sign because you would have to read it to know it's a construction site sign. So we're just calling it a site sign. And then in other places, the entire sign code in section 30-7, we are suggesting that it be repealed and replaced in its entirety. Just because there's so, as you can tell in your packets, you have a red line version and then a clean version of the sign code, and there's just a lot, and the opportunity to miss something is great with so many changes. We just decided we'd repeal and replace the whole thing. So, and then this will be part of our discussion in a little bit. But at this point in time, I would like to turn the discussion over to Martin Landers and Jerry Dahl. I don't know if Jerry was able to join us. Oh, good, he is on Zoom. And you may remember Martin and Jerry from the time when they updated our comprehensive plan. And the town's comp plan was updated in 2021 and actually received the State American Planning Association Award. So congratulations to all of you, Planning Commission and Martin, and Chris and team who were present that led the town through that process. And so Martin and Jerry are helping the town bring in some of the comprehensive plan elements into our zoning code now, which is a natural next step after you adopt code. So Trustee Hardy did give us a lot of great input after the first reading, and some of those discussion points were pretty insignificant changes, and we went ahead and made those changes, and those are in your packets. There are other non-substantive ideas that Martin and Jerry and I felt as if would be better to bring to you all, just so that you could see what those changes are, even though they're not substantive. They were a little bit more than change the word from banners, sign to banner signs, and things like that. So we just felt it would be best to bring those to you. And then after Martin and Jerry finish their discussion, we're available to discuss any questions that any town board member has about the sign code. And then should you choose to make a motion tonight, it could include something like, I move to approve this ordinance with the changes made tonight. And then your motion could be to adopt the ordinance with these changes described, then with the town attorney, just making sure that we've caught everything. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification. And if you don't have any questions for me, I'm gonna go ahead and sit down and turn the floor over to Martin and Jerry, and they will walk through some of the more detailed items that Trustee Hardy brought forth, and then any other questions that you all may have.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. Thanks, Ann. This process actually started during that comprehensive plan process. I think one of the action items was to update the sign regulations to be legally compliant, essentially to deal with this issue of content neutrality. And so that was really the main focus of this entire effort, was to scrub the code for those types of things and make sure that it was legally compliant. Along the way, we've recommended a whole bunch of other changes, and you've seen those in the red line documents that we've submitted. As Ed mentioned, there were some additional non-substantive or technical corrections that we discussed after the packets were sent out. And so we've got a handout with those.
We are in
corrections.
possession
You've
of
got
them.
that in front
Yep,
of you?
thank
Okay,
you.
great. So I just wanted to walk through those real quick before we turn it back to you for any questions.
Do you have a
Um,
copy of that? I'm
yep.
guessing. Okay.
Okay, the first one is to change director to manager in 3 different places within the code. And right now, actually, in the current code, all those places say staff. And since all those instances that we're talking about involve some sort of an action that needed to be taken, whether it was an approval or whether it might be some other action that should be done by a specific person, we put in the term director. However, right now, there's not a defined term for director. So we're recommending we change that to manager, which could be the manager or his designee, of course, which could be the director, but at least there's a defined term right now for manager. So in any event, we're recommending that change in 3 different locations. The second change is under exempt signs, and this is really essentially a clarification. Right now, the way it reads, it's a bit confusing, and so we thought that we would clarify it by removing the language that we've noted here, so it'd be more specific to signs that are not visible from any public thoroughfare or right-of-way. These would be exempt signs, typically signs that you would find on the interior of a building. So that ideally, if you're standing from a public thoroughfare or right-of-way, you're not going to be seeing signs inside of a building. Those signs are exempt. The next one has to do with sign installation and maintenance. Under here, this is just really a typo that was corrected. In the current definition for abandoned signs, it does state 3 months, which of course is 90 days. So
course, changing after 60 to 90 days. And then finally, there's a figure in here that the sign example that we used could be interpreted as being larger than what the standards would allow. So we're recommending that we switch that example out with a different example that might be more relevant to the actual standards that we're showing. So those are the 4 technical corrections that we're recommending. If you have any questions on those, happy to address any of those at this point. Other than that, turn it back over to you for any further questions regarding the code.
Excellent, thank you very much. Trustees, any questions? This makes sense. So manager would be starting out kind of referring to Administrator Kirk as a manager, or, okay,
That's how it's defined.
Okay.
Town administrator.
okay. It's admin, okay. The only question I have, there's none others. Okay, looks like we have no questions. At this time, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience? Clerk, I don't know if we have anyone signed up. Thank you. We have no one signed up. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify to this? Do we have anyone online, Clerk?
No, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the board for deliberation and a vote. How do we all feel? Trustee Ayers?
I mean, I think there are a couple questions. Generally, it's good to make all the specific changes to clarify, especially allowing people to look at the code. I have a couple of, I guess, technical questions that weren't specifically dealing with the technical questions. One of them is about the dark skies or the illumination section, which is on page 16. Are those the lighting and the visible lighting, is that taking into account any of the geography of the area? For instance, if the light is elevated, it may seem to be a lot brighter than it actually is. Is that taken into account with the code, or is it just from the height of the light source itself, I guess? Is that appropriate to ask questions at this point about it?
Yeah, no, it'll work. Do we mind answering this question about, I guess it might be it's not Kelvins, but I guess the lumens or something, the power, is that the kind of the question from,
No,
where are we
it's
measuring?
really, it's visibility, right? So the
It's on
diagrams
terrain.
on page 16 are pretty specific as to what constitutes the code language for the actual lighting. But is that taking into account any sort of lighting that would be seen from an elevated position, which might cause more glare? For instance, if a building or a sign is on a hill when you're driving, it might be specifically to code for the site of the sign, but not necessarily from viewing.
Sure, and let me make sure I understand which image you're looking at, because we've removed some images here.
I'm on the red line version, page 16 of 43.
Right, so the image that you're looking at actually has been removed. That's actually a deleted
So
image.
the entire section, that because it's in 3.7.
Yeah, so right now what we're doing is we're referencing the dark sky standards that are currently within the code. So regardless of whether it's signs or whatever the case might be, everything is referenced back to those dark sky standards. We didn't think that these particular images really served the sign code very well in terms of illumination, so those have now been pulled out.
But just for my curiosity, I guess, because I'm not specifically familiar with the dark skies code, does it take that into account, or is it just from the elevation of the actual sign or light
That's a
source?
good question. Maybe Ann might have that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
So we evaluate every project specific to where it is and how the light source may impact surrounding properties. We ask individuals to do a lighting plan that shows the what is spread off-site. So you're right in that some light fixtures, the way they're positioned, you may see the light source. But the code actually, the dark sky code actually says that the lighting fixture has to be shielded so that you can't see the source of light. We have worked with some property owners on shielding a little bit better. And we have had some businesses actually just go ahead and shut their lights off. So if you know a specific instance that is a problem, just give us a call and we'll take a look at it and we'll work with those property owners.
And then did you say we were gonna discuss the sandwich signs, sidewalk signs as well in the future?
You bet, and I can pull that image up now and we can take a look at it.
Sure. And so which one of these, according to the new code, are any of these possible? Are any of these specifically forbidden in the new code?
Well, in the current code, the way that it's defined is the middle image as an A-frame. And even in the proposed code or the current code, we have not changed that definition in terms of that A-frame style. So the one that would be permitted would be that middle one for both the current code and the proposed code.
What is wrong, I guess, with, or what was the, I guess, reasonings behind the left and the right image? You may not know the answer to that question.
No, I
might be asking you
don't, we
possible
didn't really
questions.
get into that
Yeah,
side
yeah.
of it, but
Yeah, so the left image is also a sandwich board sign and it's existing right now. The Bertha Drug sign, the one in the middle is a more traditional sandwich board sign. The one on the right is an image that Trustee Hardy presented that I believe he would like to discuss as providing an alternative to down signs that are on the sidewalk.
And from what I understand, one of the issues is the plastic as opposed to metal or wood framing.
that's correct. Under the current regulations for the Mountain Avenue overlay district, plastic sandwich board signs are not allowed. And so we carried that forward into the rest of the code as well.
I'm also, I think, kind of under the assumption, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the issues is that the plastic seems to be possibly more able to be blown around or move in certain circumstances, or is it just purely aesthetics, do you know?
Primarily it was aesthetics, because we did add language in here to secure any type of a sandwich board sign. So it doesn't really matter what type of a sandwich board sign material it is, they need to be properly secured so they don't blow over or cause safety problems.
Thank you. I guess Trustee Hardy, you had a kind of an issue with these? Ms. Johnson said?
Yeah, cause there's been some bad or interpretations of it in the past as to plastic, how much plastic. You know, at one point I was told the example on the right was approved, and then later on was told, not by Ann, but by previous community development director, that then it wasn't approved, and then I went about the sign content where you put the actual graphic in the metal frame there would be plastic backing because it's more cost effective than a metal backing or wood backing, and then it was denied again. Then this was just a conversation. This wasn't about any project or anything that I made work on. It was just testing the code, and it basically just came down to just a flat out, well, no plastic at all is permitted. And I just thought that was a bit strict and harsh based on what people are wanting to get. Because when you go do a search for a sidewalk sign for your business, majority of them that you'll find when you come up in the shopping cart or in the Google search are made either primarily or parts of being plastic. Even the metal and these wood frame ones, require some sort of plastic insert or whatever to update the content of the pancakes or the Bertha drug. These two examples are actually chalkboard ones. Not a lot of people are gonna sit there and handwrite out the chalkboard every time. They're gonna want the printed piece in there. I've also seen plastic signs that are pressed and colored to actually look like wood signs. So they look like wood, but they're still plastic, and again, based on how the code is written, they would not be allowed. So that's kind of the different scenarios that I was trying to press on how enforceable, how strict is it gonna be? I was just trying to figure out, better ways to define that, or just request that the term plastic just be removed altogether, and just encourage creativity and that sort of thing. Cause I even contacted at one point, not code enforcement, the community development director in Glenwood Springs, Breckenridge, and Steamboat, and asked them about their concerns, and they said, well, we considered things like that, but we went the route of encouraging creativity over restricting. And then their big main concern again was also making sure the building or the signs are secured in some manner so that they don't blow over or get kicked out in the public right away.
With that explanation, I would actually kind of agree, especially since it seems pretty easy for a business and the sign company itself that produces the signs to have plastic inserts instead of chalkboard that would look like chalkboard, and anyone walking by wouldn't necessarily know. And it does seem that saying no plastics whatsoever kind of eliminates the option for quick changes, eliminates the option for personalized signs if you don't have a calligraphy artist on hand to make the sign. I mean, the one in the center obviously is really well done, but I think you could produce that with plastic that would look like chalkboard, and it wouldn't be, I guess, noticeable by anyone as being plastic.
Just as a point of clarity, Mayor Karspeck, I think the new language in the code only says that plastic frames are not allowed. So I think in the plastic sidewalk frames are not allowed is, I'm gonna get the section wrong. But it's the section about sidewalk signs.
It's section,
Here we go, 30-7-110, paragraph D,
110.
1D. It's on,
Page 39 of the PDF.
is that right?
D1D actually.
The clean version is on page 68 of the PDF, I think. So in either case, so the update has been plastic sidewalk sign frames not being allowed. I don't believe there's a prohibition against plastic sidewalk inserts anymore. But I think this is one of those subjective decisions the board gets to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that I didn't interrupt you, did I? Administrator Kirk?
What was that?
Did I interrupt you? I didn't mean to.
Oh, not at all. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, so I hope I didn't do that.
No, so I would have basically the same comment, I think, for that center picture. I mean, a stamped plastic or some sort of molded plastic, I don't think aesthetically is going to be noticed one way or another by anyone walking down the street with the quality of some of the molds that exist. And it, in the long run, if a sign is outside, it may end up, it could end up being better in the long run if it were a plastic frame as opposed to a less than high quality wooden frame, because the wooden frame would have the possibility of degrading faster and to a higher degree than a plastic. I mean, I don't have necessarily any comment about limiting to A-frames one way or another. I just think that I don't see a difference with a plastic frame, if it, I don't wanna limit it here on something that I can't back up, but I don't see an issue with necessarily a plastic frame that's made to look nicer, horribly vague term that I just came up with, nicer. But then it's sort of, like I said, a low quality wooden frame.
And that's why I put the one sample in there, cause that's a metal frame, but the base is plastic, which is that considered part of the frame?
Right.
But it's meeting the requirements of having it being weighted so it doesn't blow away.
So that is a metal
And
frame
there's-
on the right?
Yeah, it's an aluminum top frame, but then it didn't submit another photo because I didn't go take one, but there's actually a metal A-frame sidewalk sign out on Main Street right now. They've got a 10-pound plastic weight holding it in place.
Mhm.
So would that then disqualify that sign because now there's plastic on the frame?
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm getting at with the term plastic.
I mean, I would agree with that I would agree with that question because I assumed that the one on the right was all plastic.
And then
Would
without-
that, according to the new proposed code, would the one on the right be allowed because it's a metal frame with a plastic base?
I think that practically speaking, from an enforcement perspective, it starts to get really fuzzy.
Right.
That's a good question. If they're using a plastic weight on a wooden frame, I mean, I don't know that there's practically any difference. I think what we were trying to do is strike a balance between the old code and a less restrictive newer version. But if the board has no issue with plastic weights or plastic frames, I think it's a simple answer, or it's a simple change.
I mean, it honestly sounds like it just, we can get rid of the word plastic and it just say, you know, signs are in good repair and are weighted, so they don't fly away. I think that's like the main two things that I'm seeing here, so we're not losing the aesthetic side and they're not becoming projectiles on the other side.
And they are required to be anchored to the ground or weighted sufficiently not to blow, to prevent movement by the wind, so that provision is in the code. I think that's an easy one. I think really the only issue is plastic or no plastic. And I don't think from a staff standpoint that we have a strong opinion either way. I think it's a subjective kind of aesthetic decision of the board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a problem with plastic. I agree with Trustee Grace's in good repair. I think that's kind of the purpose of this, right, is to have good aesthetics. And so I would think that that's the more important aspect of it. Because I mean, sometimes you can't tell if stamped plastic is plastic or not. Just kind of like, you know, floorboards, you sometimes can't tell if it's stamped wood or not until you actually start walking around on bare feet. So if it's a purely aesthetic issue, I don't really have a problem with plastic.
Agreed. Trustee Murphy?
I would just ask, from an enforcement perspective, is, you know, putting a provision in there regarding keeping it to a high standard of maintenance acceptable? Is that something you could enforce?
I think that we'd probably, those kind of subjective aesthetic decisions are very difficult to enforce. But I do think that if they are objectively falling apart or in disrepair, kind of any reasonable person would define that. I think that's something we could work through their permit process for. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that would be a challenge to enforce, I think. Clerk Smarty, you agree?
I think perhaps if the code stated in good repair, I would hate for it to get into the aesthetics of it. If the springs are broken in that example, that could not be in good repair, but it really needs to be pretty black and white. That way, when we look at signs along the road or along Mountain Avenue, we can treat them all fairly as far as the enforcement, and it's not turning into a case-by-case basis.
Please.
I just want to point out, we do have a standard, in fact, it's the current standard that the town has for maintenance. And I'll just go ahead and read what it says. And it says that the owner of any sign regulated by this section shall be required to keep signs and supporting hardware, including temporary signs, et cetera. Structurally safe, clean, free of visible defects, and functioning properly at all times.
Seems pretty
Yep.
objective.
Works for me.
To retain or drop the provision.
For
Plastic.
Yeah.
Drop.
Just drop, sounds like drop it. I agree. Works for me. I think when we originally put that in, it was just to keep out kind of tacky designs, but I think the original beforehand and stuff, this was kind of rushed. They had something in place, but I don't think it was ideal, so I think plastic kind of.
Reference in 2 spots.
Yes, it is. Well, actually, there was a spot located in
The
the
definitions page,
Mountain Avenue
page 15.
on page 15.
Trustee Kurtz?
I have no really further comments, but I agree with the determination of removing the plastic.
Trustee Hardy?
Yeah, I've got 1 or 2 still. More or less conversation or observations, not really demands for changes, but just kind of spark conversation. The table 7.9 banner sign standards. When we first got the packet last week, it said 32. That was actually didn't change to our current code, which is 60 square feet. But an observation that I pointed out was that most of the banners that we hang over Mountain Avenue are actually 30 feet by 3 feet, which is 90 square feet total. So any thoughts on changing that square
What page is
footage?
that?
Page 37 of 43.
37, thank you. So the gist of it is that the signs we hang currently are larger than what this is proposing?
Yeah. And part of the discussion was most of those banners that are hung over Mountain Avenue are town signs, which would ultimately be exempt from the sign code anyway. But just for definition and clarity, would we want to just up that so that the town wouldn't actually be an exemption, it would actually be within.
That makes sense, but what was the context of having the smaller sign? Was that kind of being taken
I think the
advantage?
32 was a mistake, from a conversation with you, that it should have been 60 or something.
60 is the existing,
Yeah.
and the 32 is what other special event signs were. So it was originally put at 32, but when it was pointed out regarding the existing at 60, it made sense to put it right back to where it was. As Trustee Hardy has mentioned, it really is an exemption issue for the town because the town is not necessarily, I mean, the town could put up a 90 square foot sign. This is really for installation by people that are not part of the town perhaps.
And this is for, I see it now, banners, so this would be over anything or just over Main Street?
No,
Everywhere.
this is any banner that's done as part of a special event,
And it looks like they're temporary by definition, so
right?
it wouldn't be a store's new sign per se.
I see. That's fine with me to keep it, make sure the town falls in line, or so this would be proposing a larger sign.
Yeah. Just to kind of make it all kind of match wherever you have a sign hanging, cause my thought was is if someone sees a 3 foot by 30 foot banner over the highway and then they wanna put a 3 foot by 30 banner on their building, they get told no, well, there's one over there. So,
And what's the temporary timeline? Is that 30 days or less, or?
30 days, no more than 2 times per year.
I guess I don't see a problem with that. Anyone feel passionately the other way? Or feelings?
No, I mean, I might just ask if there's some unintended circumstance that we're not thinking about. I
Yeah.
do agree with Trustee Hardy's sentiment, but just, is there something that could happen?
Right. Why was this that way?
Yeah, typically you're gonna have larger banner signs over a highway or a road than you will on a building. And so that's the reason why there's a different standard. That's why the town would be exempt from that situation. So a 60-foot size is what you currently have for your commercial areas where you're gonna have these types of special event signs placed on typically walls for buildings. Now, you could go from 60 foot to 90 foot, but that's quite a considerable increase in size for a building. It may not seem that large when you're talking about a street or, you know, over a right of way, because you need more size to get across the road. But typically those again are exempt from the regulations because they're special circumstance
Mhm.
versus what you typically would have for most applications, which would be for commercial use in a business district.
So this would be like, for a business, it'd be like a grand opening sign
Correct.
or, okay.
Yeah, that's very typical.
I guess some examples that I could think of that's coming in our future would be like maybe that big storage facility that wanted to build over there up at 287 across from the TPC. That would be a huge building. They'd probably want to put a banner up there advertising. That's a large building, and a 3x20 banner would look like a Post-it note. So there's other cases where, other than over the highway, but I was just trying to keep it all consistent across the board, just to make it black and white, as in, I think it was Aaron or Christian said, make it black and white, so.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that most businesses would kind of self-eliminate
Yeah.
the ridiculous size if it wasn't proportionally correct, you know.
'Cause right now,
for
I
their
can-
business.
The 3x30 banners, I only see those above the highway currently.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a few of them in maybe Fickle or even out at the rec center corner there. It's, the 3x30 is not used very often currently in our town. From what I can remember, most of the time, like even with the Christmas holiday lights, I think she made those 3x15. Bash is 3x20.
I guess I don't have a problem keeping it the way that it's proposed, having it smaller, but I also don't have a problem
I just wanna
larger either.
put it out there to point out that 3x30 is that's our biggest banner we see in town.
Yeah, not to prolong it or like to play devil's advocate, but do we have a variance process? Like say the storage facility wanted to have that large sign and they came to us and said, it's gonna be 90 square feet, like
Personally, to me, I
Yeah.
don't like variances.
Yeah,
I like good code.
yeah,
Personally, but
yeah.
it's like there's to me variances are little, I was like, okay, you're the exception. But there are good times for variances too. I just
No,
say
there are variants.
we've had to.
And
We've
the
had to pass a
the
few, 'cause there's
standard
Attorney
for,
Smith?
the standard for approving a variance is gonna be hardship, and
Yeah.
it's not likely going to be a hardship in that
Hardship, okay.
situation that trustee Kurtz mentioned.
But there is that option too.
Does anyone, sounds like we're all kind of neutral on that. Anyone agree to increase it?
Or keep it at 60.
We're all pretty neutral.
Has anyone complained specifically in the past?
No, not that I'm aware of. Has anyone complained based on our current 60-foot code?
Nobody has asked for larger based on the 60-foot code. No one's complained about banners other than they're up longer than they need to be, and we are addressing that. But nobody's asked for greater than 60.
Okay, so it's not currently a problem. Just wanted to try and.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd put it out there in observation. So keep it 60. I'm cool with that.
Okay, well, that sounds like we're okay with keeping it there, okay.
Yeah, and then just another conversation piece, not a demand or request, it's just the maximum time permitted, 30 days and 2 times per year. Thinking from a business owner side of things, there's a lot of companies that maybe have seasonal sales, where they might have a spring sale, summer sale, fall sale, so would we wanna consider maybe offering a frequency, maybe shorter time frame, like, for 2 weeks per quarter, if you wanna choose the quarterly process. They could hang it for 15 days or 2 weeks versus 30 days for twice a year. Just
Still
just-
keeping to the 60-day
yeah.
annually.
Have we, to Director Johnson, have we had any requests to lengthen the temporary signs right now?
No.
Okay, I do see that kind of point of a fall sale or something for 15 days.
Just do something quarterly and just kind of split it up so that you can do 4 times, but it's only gonna be 15 days of display. So you still have the same number of days of displaying it per year in front of your establishment or wherever you're displaying it, but you can do it 4 times instead of just twice.
And yeah, I just might just run into a staff, makes it a little harder on staff, right, to try and enforce 4 times a year versus 2.
It does, and especially for the short time period. So then we would really have to be watching everybody that puts a temporary banner up, only allowing it for 15 days, getting them to take it down and then going back out. So it does add more to staff, but again, we'll
I've gotta invent a self-destructing banner material.
Go for it.
Paper.
We would love that, because we have a lot we can tell you to go do.
Then this wouldn't be an
Inspector
issue.
Gadget has that, right?
How do we feel about that?
Self-destruct.
Just to
They
stay
had
on,
those tape recorders back in the sixties that self-destructed.
just to stay on topic here, how do we feel about the 4 times a year versus keeping it at 60, but it's 4 times a year, or 230s? I could see the staff making
Going
that.
crazy over, yeah.
Yeah.
Just, again, I just wanted to pose the question,
Yeah.
see what anybody thought.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the issues to staff, but I also understand the economic value of having it quarterly, especially with the different seasonal sales. Or if there's maybe, you know, a 2-month period or I guess a 3-month period where they have 3 sales in a row, they're only allowed to advertise for 2 of those as opposed to being able to, maybe they only have 3 sales a year, 3 big sales or something. It's just random guess, but if they have 3 sales a year, they're only able to advertise for 2 of them. They might not even need a 4th if they're allowed to advertise once per quarter.
I see that. That kind of makes sense. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it staff's life easier with that, some kind of form ahead of time.
Yeah, cause either way, it's enforcement, and right now, it seems like the enforcement thing's been kind of an issue anyway, and it's just been kind of like on a complaint basis or whatever, but cause I see a few places in town that have banners up all the time, all year. And then I was gonna question too,
Let's
forgot to
hold
write
on,
this-
before we get to this next question, how do we feel about, so trustee Ayers, you kind of agree that it might make sense to do smaller segments more times throughout the year,
Yeah,
allow that?
because, I mean, since sales, I mean, these aren't just necessarily like event signs, they could be sale signs,
Yeah.
right? And that's limiting to a business.
Okay.
So in that regard, I would be okay with increasing the number, maybe decreasing the time.
Well, and we have to remember that we cannot regulate on what the content of the language is on the sign. So we couldn't regulate
That says sale.
quarterly sale. It would be any banner can be up for this period of time.
To look here, the definition of banner, does that include like the window stickers that you see in windows of establishments advertising this month's special or anything?
No.
That's a different type of
It's an
sign.
exterior
It's a
hanging.
window sign, actually.
It's a window sign, okay.
We define window signs in the new code, so we've got both
Yeah, okay.
temporary and permanent window signs.
That's right. Okay, I do remember seeing that now, come to think of it.
Can I ask Director Johnson a clarifying question? So we can like regulate if it's like profane or something, right? Like,
We cannot, that,
Freedom of speech.
The question for Jared.
yeah,
like if there was a
Yeah,
business
Jerry.
owner on Mountain Avenue.
Jerry and Aaron.
Yeah.
Attorney Smith?
Well, Jerry is our First Amendment expert, but when it comes to profanity, we have the ability, if it is so extreme.
Sure.
But it is gonna be a tricky area. But it hasn't been an issue
Yeah,
so far.
yeah, no, just, the statement just kind of caught me.
We can probably talk about a lot of hypotheticals.
Yeah, I guess the big would be something religious or something political. I mean, if you're saying if it's
Well,
extreme, it'd be like cuss words?
First Amendment law accepts from the protection of the First Amendment something that is truly profanity, right? But then the question becomes,
What is?
and it's usually a judge who's going to decide that. So
At which point you're well past 30 days.
Okay, well, how do we, okay, so I guess, gosh, I'm in a pickle here because I feel both sides on this. It's just more regulation for staff to enforce, but it's generally complaint based. Like there's no one driving around saying you hit your 29th day, you need to remove it tomorrow.
Well, right now we have been complaint based. There are a lot of, to be consistent and fair, we are going to start talking to folks about their banner signs more. And it is complaint based and we are getting a lot of concerns about the length of time some banners have been up.
Okay.
So we will have to start taking a more proactive approach and probably recognizing the moment a banner goes up and making sure they know when the banner needs to come down. There was one of the floppy guys out at
The dancers.
in 287 and that was removed So we are paying attention to a lot of matters.
Okay. Well, I guess in that case, I do kind of see, to make this a little bit more palatable in businesses, I guess I can kind of see that too, the ultimately 60 days, but you can kind of spread that out versus blocks. I guess I agree with you, trustee Ayers too, and trustee Hardy. Anyone else feel?
I don't have a strong
Okay.
opinion either way. I'm okay with
Okay.
the addition, if that's okay.
Is anything else, trustee Hardy?
Just, I don't know if you wanna bring it up, it's just a little minor one, but it was just kind of a.
Here's your shot, go for it.
What page is this on? It's regarding yard signs. Scroll. Went too far. It's yard sign, section F-1-B.
What's the page?
Page of PDF.
42.
42. My little, don't have my mouse with the scroller. It states, unless otherwise specified, yard signs shall be displayed no more than twice per year per dwelling unit. So with all these new developments and stuff going in, where they're kind of doing their yard signs to say, turn right, shop here, they're not really specified to a dwelling unit. So how can we address this in that way of, you know, cause you always see like open house signs, turn around, go back to, you know, whatever homes that's building, and you'll see like 10 of them in a road going down the road. And so it's not specified to a dwelling unit or an address, it's to a whole development. So
Those are actually different than the yard signs, those are,
they're using yard signs.
but they're off-premise signs, these are.
Well, they're usually in the right of way of CDOT, and CDOT comes through and cleans them up, takes them away. But there are some times where they've got them off CDOT right away, and they've actually got them on their development property, sort of thing, or on private property, so that CDOT can't come through and take them, but.
You're saying that the signs referring to on page 42 refer to on-premise signs?
Correct, and
Okay,
the signs that you're referring to are an off-premise directional sign,
okay,
Yeah.
alright, so
two different things.
we've addressed it in two different places, I guess. Okay, I just saw that and was like, it clicked and I wanted to put a little.
And this is consistent with your current code for garage sales, yard sales, all the types of signs that we can no longer call content-based signs that are now called yard signs. We can't call them a yard sale sign, we can't call them a real estate sign, we can't call them
Political
a
signs.
political sign, we call them yard signs now. But they're all on-premise temporary signs.
So you can put up your, I support this candidate 1 year, and then you can have one garage sale that summer.
No, there's actually a different standard how's it read here? Unlimited number of yard signs are permitted within 60 days before and 5 days after any general or special election.
Okay.
So that's a carve out, so that you're not gonna tell somebody that they can't have 5 signs for the 5 candidates that they wanna promote in their yard.
Well, no, I was just talking about twice a year, so if you put up in an election year, you may have 2 garage sales and a political sign, but no, now you can only put up.
No, because political signs are treated separately.
Right.
Okay,
They
alright,
they don't count towards your code.
alright.
Right.
So anyway, I was just, that's why I was like, it's like, do I wanna bring this up and debate it, but.
No, it sounds like
From that one,
we're all pretty stoked on that.
I was just kinda wondering more definition on that.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's it. for
Awesome.
me.
Trustee Murphy? Thanks.
No comments.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Same.
I have no comments either. I think trustee Hardy had some good points. I'm glad we reached some common understanding on that. Okay, if there's nothing else, I do believe general code amendments, 1334, would any trustee like to move on ordinance 1334?
So moved.
Okay, trustee Hardy's moved on 1334.
Second.
And Mayor Pro Tem Grace is seconded. Is there any alterations or final?
We gotta add the,
Yeah,
the
thank you.
Oh,
changes.
duh,
That's right.
thanks.
And the town attorney has picked up 2 changes.
Plus the town attorney's changes?
Well, no, these would be the
Oh,
changes
tonight.
that you discussed, and they are on page 37 of the red line. And it is to change the table so that the banners, signs are allowed for 60 days on a quarterly basis, 4 times. So the 2 in that box changes to 4, and the 30 and that box changes to 60.
Okay.
And
So
then the
did we do 60 or 90? We, so 60,
60.
which is how the cook's written today.
Right.
No, we're talking about the time for banners,
Oh,
the time for banners.
Total
So if you turn to page 37 of the red line, there's a table. And there is in the last box, maximum time period, the 30 days changes to 60, as I understand it, and the 2 times per year changes to 4 times per year.
Yep, okay.
Okay, and the other change that I understand from the council's deliberations is on page 39 of the red line.
Attorney Smith, just for clarity, I think what, and maybe we just need to improve the language. It actually should be 15 days, no more than 4 times per year, which would be a total of 60. But the way that this was previously written, it was 30 days at a time, twice a year for a total of 60.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
thank
It is,
you.
it is actually a
Thank you.
little
My-
bit confusing,
my
but
mistake.
yeah.
yeah.
So
this-
15 days, no more than 4 times per year.
Yes, thank you.
Is that what we
Then
were thinking?
And then the other change is the change on page 39 of the red line, which essentially is, well, it's to eliminate subsection 1D, which said that plastic sidewalk sign frames are not allowed. So that restriction goes away in entirety.
Can we just say with those amendments, or do you want to,
Yes,
okay.
with those amendments.
Trustee Hardy, do you, that's,
yes.
okay, and Mayor Pro Tem?
I was trying to write it down, but
Okay.
now I can't even read my own hand.
All right, so
I'll
we've,
just say that.
Ordinance 1334, moved and seconded with the amendments proposed by, or given by Attorney Smith. Any final discussion?
Do we need addition of these technical corrections as well?
The ones that,
That was included.
Okay.
Yes, please.
with those as
Yes,
well?
with those technical corrections as well, thank you.
With the, also with the technical corrections given since the packet went out. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, trustee.
Ordinance 1334 has been approved. We can move on to agenda item number 5, which is general code amendments regarding Innovation District First Street Corridor. And this is a public hearing as well. Just before you start, Director Johnson, can folks in the audience hear? Okay, you can, great. Okay, had some complaints last time, so I'm glad.
Got it dialed in.
Well, this one, Mayor Karspeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees, this one should be a lot less, generate a lot less discussion, but you never know.
You never know. You just jinxed it.
In April of last year, you all adopted the First Street Overlay Design Guidelines. And that was a direct outcome of the 2021 Comprehensive Plan update. One of the things that we didn't do on the tail of adopting those guidelines is write it into code and adopt and have the code reference those design guidelines so that when we're working with the development community, they are made aware immediately in our land use code that these design guidelines do exist. So all we're asking for tonight are some minor language additions. And again, Martin and Jerry have drafted these just to recognize that the town does have design standards for the Innovation District. And that concludes my presentation, and Martin and Jerry may have additional information that they want to share.
Thank you.
I don't really have any additional information I'd like to share. I'm certainly available for any questions that you might have.
Do you mind just going over some of them, just for the audience?
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, this begins with having an intent section, boundaries that we describe the particular area that we're talking about, and then a map that shows that area as well. And what we're talking about is the First Street corridor. And this extends from Mountain Avenue all the way up to Highway 287 between First Street and the railroad.
Thank you.
And again, as Ann mentioned, this was all part of what was known as the First Street Corridor Overlay District Plan that the board approved, I think about, I don't know how long ago it was. About a year ago now, it seems like. And so then we've got a section on applicability of these, and so that lists, how these particular standards are applicable. And so it has to do with any construction of new principal structures, any parking area reconfiguration, structural alteration. There's a section here on sign permits, which ties back in with the sign regulations. And then there's a provision regarding change of use, so any change of use then triggers compliance with the overlay district, just like the Mountain Avenue Corridor Plan. Very similar language to what you currently have in the Mountain Avenue Corridor Plan for applicability. Same thing with exemptions. We've got exemptions for any type of general property maintenance or repairs that are being done, maintenance or repairs of any kind of infrastructure that's associated within this area, as well as an exemption for any existing single-family residential uses. They are completely exempt from the requirements of this overlay district. There's a section here on legal nonconformities, some basic boilerplate language regarding nonconformities. And then there's references to the architectural standards and guidelines, which is what Ann was referencing here. And so we identify what the various sections are of the code that these tie back to. So again, this would be helpful for anyone that's actually doing any kind of development within this area. They know exactly what standards that are going to apply to this particular area. It's a lot less wordy than the Mountain Avenue Overlay District. I don't know if you've used that section of the code before, but part of the idea here was to really streamline it and just get down to the essence of what was important and to cross-reference wherever possible. We've also added some use of dimensional standards, which are almost all per the underlying zoning of the district. So it's really just, again, as Ann mentioned, it's kind of a clean, streamlined way to identify what is required within this particular area, consistent with the First Street Overlay Plan.
That really makes sense. Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Well, this time I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this First Street Innovation District overlay? We have no one signed up. Anyone in the audience didn't have a chance to sign up? Clerk, do you have anyone online?
There's not, Mayor Grossman.
All right, I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board for deliberation. Sounds like we're all in support. Okay, would anyone like to move on this? 1336.
I'll move to
Sorry.
approve ordinance 1335, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud, Colorado, adding section 3 to the Berthoud Municipal Code, chapter 30, to support the 2023 adoption of the Innovation District First Street Corridor Guidelines.
Thank you. Trustee Murphy has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Is there any final discussion, amendments? Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz.
Yes.
Mayor Karsnett.
Yes, okay. 1335 has been approved as well. We'll move on to our final regular agenda item tonight, and this is the oil and gas regulations presented by our oil and gas attorney, Mike Foote. I don't know where Michael came from. It says Mike. Welcome.
Okay, well, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, trustees. Good to see you all again. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting pretty close to these final regulations upon your approval. Interestingly, even though I think as I pointed out in the memo, we've been meeting for upwards of a year and a half at this point, off and on, and received some public comment during that time. We've received a decent amount of public comment very recently from industry folks, from API and most recently from Koga. You should have read or you should have received and probably read the memo that I wrote in response to the API memo about the changes that were made as a result of their feedback. The information we received from Koga was just today. I received it at about 5:15 today, so I haven't had a great amount of time to digest it, but there is a point or two that I'll bring up. That's what you have in front of you, in your name, Mr. Mayor. So I'll bring up a couple things that I think would be helpful to get trustees' directions on. And of course, we'll continue to try to refine and based on public comment that we hear tonight, as well as any further public comment before the second reading
the ordinance comes. But in the meantime, I'd like to just go over a summary of what you have in front of you with the ordinance. The outline here tonight that, of what I'd like to present to you, first we'll do again a quick review of the process because I think it always helps to know where we've been and the steps that we've taken. Then do a broad overview of what you have in front of you with the ordinance, and then go through a summary of each section. The intent really isn't to go through word for word, of course, but pick out some of the sections of or some of the parts of each section that really bear mentioning. And then, of course, open for discussion, questions, concerns, thoughts, anything that you have at that point. Okay, so just reviewing over the process here, as you remember way back when we started, the first area that we tackled was about location in general. Both location, distance between existing residential facilities and other facilities and proposed new oil and gas facilities, and then in reverse or reciprocal setbacks, how much distance between existing oil and gas facilities and new housing development and other types of development. So we decided that in tranche one, or at least you all decided a tentative direction to go after tranche one. Tranche two dealt with the extensive number of health and safety regulations that we have been discussing. Tranche three then dealt more with things like inspections, with enforcement, and general procedures about how a new oil and gas application would be processed through the town. I just wanted to highlight some of the, actually, all of the previous meetings that we had, and just so you have this in front of you, but there have been several previous meetings going all the way back to June of 2022, September 2022, January of 2023, March of 2023, July of 2023, and then January of this year. And then, of course, this meeting, and then we're set tentatively for March 26th as well. And you also have in your possession, I'm sure, some previous memoranda that have outlined some of the details about other jurisdictions, particularly those jurisdictions that we focused on, meaning Broomfield, Erie, Superior, Larimer County, and then, of course, the state regulations. And some of the information around those regulations, as well as public health, safety, welfare, environmental, and wildlife concerns that can accompany oil and gas development. So as I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, there has been some public comment through the process. What I've heard from the public comment, to the extent that it's been given, has been that folks are interested in protective regulations. That's also the discussion that we've had, that you're interested in protective regulations, but not something that kind of walks out on a plank and puts you all out really, how do I put it, so that you're, you know, kind of blazing a new trail. So that's the Goldilocks scenario that we've been talking about, that you all have given guidance to us to guide these particular regulations. There may have been some public comment that I was not privy to, but I just wanted to quickly summarize that for the purpose of this presentation. And then, as I indicated, we've recently received some industry feedback. The API feedback was extensive, was detailed, and there were a number of changes that were made as a result of that. The COGA feedback is also extensive. It brings up several areas of their concern, and we'll of course go through that with the same kind of attention to detail and consideration that we did with the API feedback. So the new ordinance outline that you have in front of you goes through sections 30-11-101 all the way through 109. 101, of course, is the purpose. 102 goes into definitions. 103 is, as we discussed, locations for new facilities. Then 104 is locations for new development around existing facilities. 105 is really the majority of the this regulation. It has all of the new regulations for, I should say regulations for new oil and gas locations. 106 brings it all together in a way that is fairly parallel to what you all do with other types of applications for new development. And I'll go over that in a little more detail when we get to the 106 section. 107 goes over insurance requirements as well as financial assurances. 108 is more of the procedure about inspections, enforcement, and fines. And then 109 talks about
more of a streamlined, but still a permit process for any kind of seismic operations that would need to occur as a result of, or looking into new oil and gas operations or as a result of oil and gas operations. So again, just going over these sections very broadly, section 101 talks about purpose authorities and application to existing facilities. There is the criteria for approval or denial, which I've highlighted here. The bottom line is that you are looking at this through the lens of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife. And it indicates that you will approve an application that you think fits that criteria and deny an application that you think do not fit that criteria. This regulation also does include pre-existing facilities. This is not unusual. Most local regulations do include pre-existing facilities, and so that's included in this regulation as well. And then included in that is an annual operator registration, which again is not unusual. There are other local jurisdictions that do the same thing for pre-existing facilities and facilities going forward. So section 102, there are a lot of definitions. I won't go over them all or anywhere close to that, but I will highlight that we made some changes to the oil and gas operations definition. This was partially in response to the API feedback and also really just going through and trying to tighten up all the definitions before this last version was sent to you. There was maybe some internal confusion between the definitions for oil and gas operation, oil and gas facility, oil and gas location. And so I spent a fair amount of time making sure that all of those actually made sense. And hopefully I got that right on that. And of course it will bear another look just to make sure that those all do make sense. Pipelines was a major area of the API feedback that we made revisions to based on that feedback. Pipelines are kind of a jurisdictional, they're very complicated jurisdictionally. There are some pipelines that are under the jurisdiction of the Public Utilities Commission, some pipelines that are under the jurisdiction of the federal government, some pipelines that are under the jurisdiction of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Those that are under the jurisdiction of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, to the extent that they affect surface disturbances, can come under local jurisdiction. And so the bottom line is I tried to really make sure that we were tight with those jurisdictional issues and addressing the pipelines that should be under local jurisdiction and just leaving out any kind of locational jurisdiction that, or I should say, any kind of locational say that you would have over things that are not under your jurisdiction. So in other words, when it comes to gathering lines, which are under PUC jurisdiction, the way that these revised or the latest revision of the regulation goes is that you're still asking the operator for some information about where they're located, but you as the town are not having any kind of a say as to where they're located because that's a PUC issue. But still, you should have the ability to know where they're located, and that can help you with other surface issues and planning for other things to put around those pipelines. So that's the way that we really made sure to try to address those jurisdictional issues, is that you all aren't saying where something like gathering lines are going, but you're finding out where they went, and that should be something that the town would be interested in. Okay, and venting is another definition that went under substantial revision as a result of feedback. A number of exceptions were put into place to account for safety and equipment repairs, those types of things. So 103 is the location restrictions for new facilities. As a review, you know that what you tentatively approved way back when we first started this was zoning restrictions and restricting an industrial operation like an oil and gas operation to agricultural, industrial, or light industrial zones. A 2,000-foot setback for a new oil and gas location from residences and other types of buildings, as well as parks and open space, schools, childcare centers, etc. And then a 150-foot setback for flow lines and transfer lines that are under the jurisdiction of the local government. So one of the bits of feedback that we received from KOGA just today was about this 2,000-foot setback. as we talked about when we were initially talking about these location restrictions, the 2,000-foot setback is not at all unusual. The state has a 2,000-foot setback with some exceptions. A number of local jurisdictions have 2,000 feet, perhaps even more. Some have exceptions, some don't. Arapahoe County recently put in a 3,000-foot setback with some exceptions. So a 2,000-foot setback is certainly within the range of what we've seen from other local jurisdictions as well as from the state. But what the COGA letter points out is that there are some exceptions. Like with the state, they have a number of exceptions to the 2,000-foot setback. Some localities do, some don't. One of those exceptions that is fairly common amongst those that have exceptions is an exception for informed consent. So if there's a property owner that is within, say, 1,500 feet instead of 2,000 feet, and they give informed consent for the facility to be located, even though it's within 1,500 feet of that person's property, then that is a common exception that we see in other local codes. And so that's something that you all could consider if you're interested in informed consent exception. There are a number of other exceptions that we see, but that one is probably the most straightforward because there's either informed consent or there's not. The Energy and Carbon Management Commission has an exception that they call the substantially equivalent protection exception. And in general, what that is that it says, look, you can go less than 2,000 feet if you show us that your facility that's 1,200 feet still has substantially the same protections as it would if it was 2,000 feet. The way that I've seen that play out is that it's pretty squishy, to use a technical term. It generally revolves around the operator saying, we think this provides substantially equivalent protections. Commissioners may be saying, well, how do you know? And the operator says, well, we know. Here's some best management practice we put into place, and then the commission has often approved it. You all, of course, can consider looking into something like that. As it's turned out, what we've seen with at least the state permits is that there have been a large minority, I would say over about 25% of the new oil and gas locations that are located within 2,000 foot of a residence. And a lot of that has been because of their exceptions, some of it because of the substantially equivalent exceptions. And so if you decide that you want to look into that, just know that that's how it's played out at the state level. It's turned out that there's been a number of exceptions to the 2,000 foot setback there. And that's, perhaps that's the direction that you want to go. Some of those, actually many of those at the state level have been because of informed consent. So that has been something we've seen at the state level as well. The 150-foot setback for flow lines and transfer lines is fairly standard as well amongst other local jurisdictions. So I'm not sure there's too much to talk about there in addition. Okay, moving on to section 104, that's location restrictions from existing facilities. What you all have tentatively approved is kind of a tiered process between where the facility is in its lifespan and how far away the new development goes from that existing facility. So for example, during the times of pre-production activities all the way up to production and a year after production begins, you initially approved a 2,000-foot reverse setback based on the premise that that is really the time where there's typically the most emissions, the most kind of danger to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife. And then after that 1 year period, then the reverse setback goes down to 500 feet. And the production period can be an extensive amount of time. It can go for decades, 10, 20, 30 years. And what we discussed there was if you have a 2,000-foot setback even during the 20th year of production, that leaves a lot of property off limits from being developed. And so the tentative decision was go down to a 500-foot reverse setback during the production period. And then once there's a plugged-in abandoned well, or all of the wells at a location are plugged in abandoned, then go down to a 250-foot reverse setback. Again, because the danger is reduced, although not completely eliminated, because wells sometimes have to be replugged after a period of time. Okay, section 105, these are requirements for the application, what kind of plans they need to specify in the application and what kind of rules they need to follow. I'll just point out that first of all, there is a cross-reference to your use by special review section. So the procedures that are in your current use by special review section would be followed here. And that's incorporated into section 105. So we didn't come up with a whole new procedure for oil and gas applications. And that was based on your all's direction and feedback that you didn't really think that was necessary and for us to try to cross-reference parts of the code when we could do that. So that's one instance where we did that. We also cross-reference to development agreements, which the town uses already, as I understand. And the development agreement would encompass different requirements that the operator would have to follow as part of that development agreement. And then I just put down here alternative location analysis through wildlife. That's basically like saying these are the regulations A through W. And there's, I think, about 20 to 21 separate sections here that are addressed in section 105. Section 106 is where it all comes together. It sets regulatory baselines from the town. It also requires the operator to submit a proposed plan, which of course the town can review and work with the operator to revise if necessary, and perhaps add additional conditions that would be the most up-to-date best management practices. And what we've talked about before is that best management practices change rather quickly in this area. What would be a best management practice here today may be something different 2 years down the road. And so 106 gives the town flexibility to say, here's our baseline, here's what we're requiring, but also since there's new technology that now is a best management condition, you all should impose it and make it part of your operation. So it gives you that flexibility so that you don't have to ask me to come back and revise your regs every time there's a new best management practice. That's probably something that you don't want to see. Again, cross-referencing here to the variance. I know that you all were just talking about that in a previous discussion, but variances are cross-referenced here. That's section 30-3-108. So there is a process for exceptions that's already built in to this as cross-referencing the variance code. Of course, that goes through the same procedures and processes and has the same standards that any kind of variance process would that comes to the town. And also this requires a memorandum of understanding which goes through the costs that would be borne by the operator, the requirements that the operator would have to go through, and just gives a document that is straightforward so everybody knows what their duties are and what's required of them. And that is part of 106 as well. Oh, finally, it does require an application fee. Again, all the costs of review would be borne by the operator. That would include any kind of experts that would need to be brought in to help analyze the application and to advise on, say, new best management practices, for example, or other technical aspects of reviewing an oil and gas application. Section 107 adds insurance and financial assurances requirements. There's insurance requirements that I don't know if I need to go over in any great detail. Financial assurances for plugging and reclamation. This is in addition to what the state is requiring. I think that we discussed earlier that the state did go through a new rulemaking that revised their financial assurance rules. The financial assurance section here is more protective or more restrictive, I guess. It requires more of a financial assurance than the state does. It requires a flat $100,000 per well financial assurance, as opposed to the state requirements that depend on the size of the operator, the production the operator has, and several other factors. So in one way, the financial assurance requirement here is a lot easier to follow. It's a lot more straightforward. In another way, it probably would require the operator put down more of a financial assurance. But it seems like that would be reasonable, particularly because the amount of money that it takes to plug wells is more substantial than many times what the state requires. Okay, so section 108 is about inspections, enforcement, and fines. It has a section that requires the operator to do certain things when inspecting their own facilities. It has a section that allows the town to do certain things with inspecting facilities if it chooses to do so. The fees for those inspections would be borne by the operator. And it also has enforcement provisions and enforcement procedures. And as you gave guidance to one of our last meetings, it allows for penalties for infractions to go up to $15,000, which matches the state statute, but is substantially higher than what the town currently would penalize somebody for an infraction. Section 109 is recently added based on our discussions that we had last time for seismic operations. It is a permitting process, but it's not nearly as extensive as the permitting process for use by special review for an oil and gas location. And this is a place where I wanted to bring up some of the differences between distances. In this case, and other cases in the regulation, we have a 1 kilometer radius. So in this case, it's a 1 kilometer radius for notice of residence instead of something like a 2,000 foot radius for notice of residences. And the theory behind that is that if you're unlikely to have residences or other buildings within 2,000 feet of an oil and gas location, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to limit the notice to just 2,000 feet because there won't be anyone to give notice to. And so when you see 1 kilometer in these regulations, that's usually where it comes from, that if you're not having something within 2,000 feet, you should have notice for those that are a little bit outside of 2,000 feet. In addition, in many cases, there are effects that are felt beyond 2,000 feet, even if it's not something that is prohibited that the operation operates within, say, a kilometer. But more notice rather than less notice is probably better for when it comes to the public being informed and being able to give feedback or at least knowing what's going on in their neck of the woods. The last section is judicial review. I don't have anything here because it's pretty straightforward that as everything that you do, it's subject to judicial review under Rule 106A4 of the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation, other than I wanted to throw in a little bit more about the COGA feedback. I did just mention to you earlier about the informed consent issue, and that's one thing I wanted to bring up. And if you had opinions about that, of course, we'd like to hear it now or whenever you would like to give that kind of feedback. The other area that's addressed quite a bit in this feedback is the air quality regulations. And so, of course, we'll go back and take a look at the air quality regulations again. I'll just say broadly that the idea of the air quality regulations is that, well, let me back up. So what the COGA and the API feedback does say is that the state has an extensive array of air regulations, and that's true. Through the Air Pollution Control Division, the state does regulate air. However, when it comes to effects in local areas, of course, local governments have the ability to go above and beyond as long as those regulations are necessary and reasonable. The premise here of what I've drafted is that the state regulations have not been sufficient to address resident concerns around these oil and gas facilities. And particularly, the experience that I'm drawing from is experience that's known very well in Erie and Broomfield, which is two of our counties or towns that we've drawn upon when trying to decide what regulations would be reasonable for Berthoud. The air emissions issue was one of the main issues in both Erie and Broomfield. They both responded to complaints because the facilities were already in, so they were responding to complaints and trying to come up with air regulations that would help respond to those complaints once they've already been happening. And so certainly I've drawn upon that experience and the information, the research that they did to come up with those regulations, and they're very much reflected in what the draft is that's in front of you. That doesn't mean that's the direction you have to go, of course. If you are comfortable with staying with the state regulations, then that's something that would be good to hear. If you want us to continue to try to refine, then of course, would like to hear that, but I'm just really looking, I guess, for maybe some general direction, since that's been the area that's taken a lot of the most negative, concerns from the industry feedback. So, either now or when you're prepared, it would be good to have some feedback about those things. And of course, any questions or further explanations that you're interested in, I'm happy to take at this point.
Excellent, thank you. Questions? Trustee Murphy?
Just referencing this COGA letter that we just recently received, there is a portion of it that brings up facilities and operations that are downgrade from any kind of water bodies and water sources. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that regarding the 2,000-foot setback and how that would be affected from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, so the 2,000-foot setback comes from, the town of Superior has a 2,000-foot setback when it comes to, downgrade from different water facilities. And so, that was really taken from them. So, I'm not sure if I have any greater insight into that, other than when we were looking at the whole array of regulations, including water setbacks. We were looking at our other towns that had recently revised regulations, and Superior was the one that has the 2,000-foot setback. Others are between 500 and 1,000 feet. Superior was 2,000 feet.
I was just interested in the aspect that or the comment they made, just having those facilities downgrade from a water body. I'm no expert on the issue, but it seems like that would necessitate some sort of carve out for the setback, I guess.
Certainly I can take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to. That's one area that I haven't had a chance to think about too much since we just received the comment, but I will certainly flag it based on your question and come back with a better answer.
That'd be perfect.
Or a more detailed answer, I should say.
Questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess I know there's a lot of directional drilling, so, you know, their pad is one spot, but directional drilling can go almost any direction. I'm just making sure that that is, in fact, you know, we can only control where they put the pad, we don't get to control where their drilling goes from there. So they can be somewhere over here, but they can drill down underneath the town and actually get to wherever they need to, but the hole is kind of at the base pad.
Yes, you can regulate where the surface impacts go, but where they drill specifically is the province of the ECMC.
Okay.
I wouldn't say they can drill wherever they want. I mean, there's geology concerns, of course. You can't just drill wherever you want, but yes, directional drilling is often used. And many times a pad will be located outside of a town or a county, and then they use directional drilling to get minerals that are actually within the town or the county.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think the only thing I wanted to bring up, I know the 2,000-foot setback, there's a lot of indignancy of like, how dare you, and honestly, it doesn't seem like it's that. Everyone else has that rule, I'm not seeing why it's such a huge deal. I guess the water thing was curious, they're claiming essentially that you're too far away, and essentially if we're uphill, it shouldn't matter. My counterpoint is they can drill any direction underneath that, so we don't even know where the outside effect is gonna go. So this is protection on the town side. I think that's more than reasonable. And then they, in my own words, it looked like just a lot of whining about their air control.
If possible, if we give, this is a
Yeah,
public hearing,
sorry.
right?
No, yeah, you're right.
No, you're good, I get you.
No, I'm just curious what if any of that seems reasonable to you, but I know you just read it, so.
I think it's worthy of study, and just like we did with the API feedback, there will probably be areas of proposed revision based on studying the feedback, and I'm happy to do so. I think it's much better to receive the feedback now than after the fact.
That's all I have.
Okay. Question? Trustee Ayers?
And this is questions, right, we can comment and.
We'll comment later. Yeah. I I agree, didn't mean to cut in, I
No,
just
no,
realized this is a,
fair
this is a
point.
public hearing with an ordinance, so,
Yeah,
go ahead.
this one is for Administrator Kirk, you were talking about is it PUC, the pipelines that are already there, we can ask where they are, but we can't really control where they are. Are those identified and marked out in preliminary plating?
If there are legal easements in place, those would be identified during plating. I don't know that pipelines, pipeline location or depth specifically are identified that I can think of, unless our community development director believes differently. But I think generally just easements would be identified during plating.
Yeah, and you're getting your steps in today. Hope you got your Fitbit on.
So if there is thank you, Mayor Kirschbeck, members of the board, if there is a pipeline that is in an easement and that easement is recorded, then when a plat would come for a subdivision or some kind of land use application, and it's picked up in the title work, then it would be illustrated on that particular plan. If it's not recorded, there's no public record of that easement. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, kinda, I'm just concerned about, and this kind of goes to Trustee Grace's comment, where the vertical drilling, obviously that's taking place under the pad, but then any sort of horizontal drilling could be going anywhere. I'm just concerned that if someone decides to develop a parcel of land where there is a pipeline underneath and they're not given the information that there is a pipeline underneath, and it's just recorded as an easement or it's not even recorded as being an active easement one way or another.
Deeper. How deep are you going? Are you like going like deep where they've gone down and then drilled a mile?
Yeah, I'm
this
just
way?
curious to see if
Right.
it's
Or are you
if it's
talking about the
located
lines
on
that are on the top that they use to distribute to the facilities?
the underground. That would
Way
be,
underground.
right.
Yeah,
I'm just
so-
curious to see if those would be marked as an easement or anything like that.
No, those would not, those are, that is the horizontal, the boring.
Right.
It is on the COGCC or CM, I can't remember what they're called now, sorry. On their website, they have a great GIS database where it will show you where they're drilling and where they're boring for the horizontal wells are. But if it is like a gathering line, a flow line, a distribution line, those types of lines usually are recorded, but not the extraction lines.
I've seen those
Can I feed up, so usually, or is there's no requirement for them to record, so like to prevent a Firestone type home explosion, there's no.
Flow line.
So yeah, the Firestone was an unmarked flow line, and lots of things going on that, but that was an unmarked flow line that they had thought had been abandoned.
Since then, is there a requirement to,
That, you should be able to get that in your title work if the oil and gas company does record those items. That was a very small line coming in to, and I believe it was I don't know all the details, but I don't think it was like a natural gas supply line to the home. I believe it was an abandoned, just a natural gas line, like a field line.
okay, so if the operator records it, but is there any state requirement now that they must record it in the title work?
Not that I know of, but I'll bet you Attorney Foot may have that information. But normally they are recorded because they're easements, they're legal documents with property owners and they want to know where those easements are. But as far as other flow lines,
Thank
why
you.
don't you answer that?
So pipelines that are under the jurisdiction of the ECMC, there were fairly recently rules that require disclosure of those to the state agency. The point behind the language here is that that information should go to you as the town as well, so that you don't have to work through the state to get that.
Got it, okay.
And as well as gathering lines, which are under the PUC jurisdiction, you should have that information, as opposed to having to try to dig that up from the PUC, if it's even available at the PUC, which I don't even know. So what happens to that information and how you're able to access it once it gets to the town is kind of beyond my province. But the idea is that you should have, at least you should have access to that information so that you're able to plan around it.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Ayers, I hijacked your question.
No worries, thank you. And I have just one final question, I don't know if you can answer this, cause it's kind of 30,000 foot. So with our proposed setbacks, et cetera, that seem to be, as you've pointed out, not overboard in their restrictions, but also a little bit more restrictive, kind of in that Goldilocks that you've been talking about. Within Berthoud's area of influence, how big of a dent from what the letter that we've received from Koga, how big of a dent is the proposed regulations putting on, let's say, every square foot of Berthoud's management area could possibly be drilled, right? How big of a dent are our restrictions putting in as opposed to 500 less feet as far as new wells, that sort of thing? Once again, sorry if you can't answer that.
As far as I know, that analysis has not been done. As far as, exactly how much Berthoud would be open to drilling and how much wouldn't be open. I don't know if that's been done, so I don't think I can answer that.
We're not gonna bankrupt the energy company if we have 500 more feet of restrictions. I know that's a silly question for me to ask you, I apologize.
Yeah, so I don't know. I do know this though, that, again, kind of going back to the variance issue. There are variances that are already built into your ordinance. And so if it turns out there's exceptional circumstances, great harm would occur, those types of standards that are already in the variance, then there is already a mechanism to go below the 2,000 foot setback if the Board of Adjustment and the trustees find that that's appropriate. So whatever calculation that one could come up with at this point, I would say would not be absolute, just given the circumstances.
Thank you.
Other questions? Regarding the informed consent, would they have to get informed consent from every occupant below 2,000 feet or within 2,000 feet to make that adjustment? I'm guessing that would be the case. So if you have one protester saying, I'm okay with the 2,000 feet, I don't want to go less, that cancels out everyone?
Well, when you say every occupant, if you have 4 occupants in a house.
Every building, I should say,
Oh.
every structure.
Right, it applies to every structure.
Okay, so if one says no, then none.
Then
yeah.
then it doesn't work.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, my other one was around surface versus pipeline, declaring the chemicals. I know API had an issue of declaring the chemicals of above ground versus below ground. If the pipeline is below ground, then it's not our jurisdiction, we don't need to know what's in there.
Right.
Have we are we still in the position that if any part of it is above ground, then we have a right to know what's going through it?
Well, if the pipeline is below ground, then what I've done is I've taken out anything about your specific regulation of what happens to that pipeline, instead focusing on the fact that the pipeline is there. And so that's how I've addressed the jurisdictional issue that has come up there. Pipelines above ground, those would most likely be just temporary pipelines, like a temporary water line, for example, that would be above ground. And those, I think, would fall under the town's ability to put conditions of approval on any kind of application. So for example, you could say, to the extent that you have an above ground pipeline that's temporary, it needs to follow an easement, or it needs to only cross the road in this spot, or whatever the conditions you wanted to put on there, because those are above ground and you have jurisdiction about over things that are above ground.
Okay.
Did I answer?
Yes, it did, thank you.
You were asking about the chemicals and what's in them.
Well, so that kind of ties into with, so there has to be some declaration, I guess there's protections, but for the most part, it has to be declared to the state what's in within, the chemicals within going in underground.
Yes.
And the API had some kind of issue of a double clarification that we're requiring the same information they gave to the state.
And you can do that. I mean, it's just requiring information that's going somewhere else, and that if you want that information, then you can do that. And with something like chemicals, it has below ground impacts, but it also has potentially above ground impacts as well.
Yeah. So our position right now is they would have to declare not only to the state, but to the municipality.
Under these current regulations, correct.
Okay.
You could decide to not do that and just rely on the state, there wouldn't be a problem with that, but what I've heard feedback over the course of this process is that you all wanna know and you wanna have this accessible by the town, and you wanna know that information.
That's all I have right now. I guess we could, if there's no other questions, we could get on to public comment and then we could get back to your original questions, Attorney Foote, on some clarification.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll move on now to public comment for this. I'll start out with those folks that signed up under general public comment. And we'll start off with Chris Nelson. And again, if you could please state your name and address, even though it's written down, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And thank you for waiting.
I'll do it. My name is Chris Nelson. I'm from Loveland, Colorado. I live at 2705 Cub Lake Drive. I was an electrician before this and worked in server farms. And we planted miles of plastic pipe in the ground. And there's a system called Trimble where you could identify where a pipe was within a quarter inch of anywhere on the planet. We had to dial 511 if we had to plant tulips. So there is a registry. These pipes are taken care of. So they're not time bombs, and there's no reason for the oil industry to keep any secrets over this. Because among other things, as you say, they're insured. And there's a tremendous amount of risk there. So if they don't comply and they soil the ground or make an environmental disaster, they're liable. Colorado has the most restrictive oil and gas regulations of anywhere on the planet. And I understand your concern, don't get me wrong, but there are 141,000 things that are made of oil, including what we drive on, the asphalt. When I was a kid, a car would get 8 to 10 miles a gallon. Now they get 20 to 30 miles a gallon. My car gets sniffed every 7 years. I understand your concern, don't get me wrong, but at some point, if you want to make it impossible to get the oil that's underneath our feet out of the ground and the gas, we don't have electric lights, because all the electric lights in this county come from Weld County, the largest deposit of natural gas in North America. It's the cheapest, cleanest way to generate electricity is with natural gas. So the alternative is that at some point, we're gonna have to put pedals on the chair so we can see what we're doing. I understand your concern, and I'm not here to insult you or any of that. But at some point, you gotta realize 350,000 people in the state have jobs in the oil industry. We're the 5th largest production of energy in all the 50 states. And if you make it impossible to make a living here in this county, it's gonna cost you tax money. It's gonna cost, matter of fact, a lot of the eastern Colorado have fire trucks that have been bought by the oil companies, and ambulances, and school buses. So I understand, but at some point it has to be a balanced approach. Because if you don't take into effect what the larger implications are. For instance, I appreciate your concern in your briefing, sir, but after this 2,000-foot setback, nobody's got a map and figured out if there are any places in this county they can drill?
Mr. Nelson, we're over the 3 minutes now.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next is Alejandra Major. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah. My name's Alejandra Major, address is 1660 Lincoln Street. I'm an associate director with the American Petroleum Institute Colorado. API Colorado is a division of the American Petroleum Institute, which represents all facets of the natural gas industry. I want to first start off by thanking the town for accepting some of our feedback and making those changes. And I want to take tonight to really talk about the work that operators and the state are already doing. Operators continue to be innovative and build upon industry best practices. This has made Colorado a leader in producing safe, affordable, and reliable industry. Notably, the town has had positive working relationships with operators within Berthoud. While Senate Bill 181 gave local governments additional authority over surface impacts of oil and gas development, it must be necessary and reasonable. Just as important in any regulatory undertaking, proposed regulations need to have basis behind them. Many of the town's provisions are duplicative of those already in place and enforced at the state level, and some of the town's provisions extend beyond its authority. Local governments have many opportunities to collaborate with the state and provide input, and we encourage the town to take up those opportunities. The state's rules address many of the concerns that the town has, and since the passage of Senate Bill 181, numerous state agencies have undertaken multiple rulemakings to further protect public health, public safety, the environment, and wildlife resources. These rulemakings have been exhaustive in their scope. They've required stakeholder engagement and presented technical data from experts. And if the town were to undertake that same level of enforcement, it would be duplicative, unnecessary, and expensive, and require staff expertise. So we encourage the town to further revise these provisions so that they closer align with the state. We're really thankful for the opportunity to comment and appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Madam Major. Finally, Benjamin Block, maybe online. Is there anyone online, clerk?
No, Mayor Christopher.
Same address as Alejandro Major. Do you know if Alejandro, did Benjamin not show up?
I'm present.
Oh, addressed, okay. All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak, testify? Sir?
I didn't sign up there.
That's okay, I told you, yeah, that's on me. If I could get your name and address, sir.
My name's Grant Gillig, and I live at County Road 4 and 21. I have a farm there. And I just wanted to bring up just a different kind of approach to the whole thing regarding farmers. I have a small hay farm. I am an environmentalist in a sense in that I take care of the land. I don't use any toxic chemicals or anything like that. But many of the farms that we're losing, the thousands that we're losing in Colorado and hundreds of thousands across the country, could be saved by going with lighter regulations on oil and gas, because the farmers own many of the mineral rights. That is a source of income. I actually own mineral rights, and if there was something put up to slant drill out to my property, I mean, that would be a benefit to my farm. So I wanted to bring that up as another option, another support of the Larimer County right to farm as a county is what we are, and just a plug here to keep farms going. And you know, when I look at some of the developments, one out there in my area, that's gonna put in like, I think 45 septics right by the Little Thompson River. And what kind of a pollution scenario is that compared to, you know, oil and gas? That's kind of you know, detrimental to wildlife as well. So I just appreciate if you would consider that, because that is helpful to our whole county as well.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Sir? Thank you.
Hello, I'm David Austin. I'm from Windsor, Colorado. My address is 701 6th Street, apartment 3A, Windsor, Colorado, 80550.
Excuse me, sir.
Reason I'm here today is to talk about.
Could you speak up a little bit?
I'm trying to.
Oh, no problem.
I'm a soft speaker, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
But anyway, the reason I come up here because I used to work in the industry. I know how all the safety regulations work. Even though farmers and like this gentleman before me said, you know, how farmers and all of them hold the land. Well, before they even lease the land to an oil company, they have to do many surveys, below ground and above ground. That means water locations, groundwater, what's underneath the rock, what's below, before they even start drilling. All within a certain amount of time, before they even start the well. On top of it, they have to make sure they got all their permits in line before they actually start it. And when they do the drilling below ground, they only drill to a certain point before the well has to turn horizontally. But in order to do that, they have to make sure they have an operations permit in order to go through with that. And also, what's directing the drill is the oil company's geologist that's on site. Looking at constant drill cuttings and also land surveys from a thumper truck. Because without it, you would not get a seismic reading of what's under the ground, if it's water, oil, or rock. And that's how they determine on an oil site, okay, where we're gonna put the drill, where we're gonna put the oil well, and where is it going to go under the ground. Right now, I live right above oil lines that are under the ground, thousands of feet down, because why? Windsor's got nothing but an oil well underneath of it. But it's surrounded by water. You look on the surface, we have lakes around Windsor, lots of them. But even though the regulation says they have to remain a certain feet away from water sources, certain feet away from everything. In most times when companies get the well going and producing and start putting gas back to the energy grid, it's metered, but also the ones that do the contracting for the pipeline is a different oil company that does oil piping for the oil companies. They're the ones that do all the permitting. They're the ones that write out, okay, what's the number of a pipeline? Where is it located? What's its flow? And then there's an overseer company that follows that oil line, if it's a flow line, is it carries gas, carries oil, carries gasoline, whatever. That company is responsible to make sure make sure those flow lines are running right, there's no leaks, and they have to make sure that they have a government overseer that ensures that the piping and everything is up to snuff.
Mr. Austin, we're over our 3 minutes here.
I'm sorry,
I think you're
but
fine,
that's
thank
all
you.
I have to say, I'm hoping that, I said some insight.
Thank you very
maybe
much.
help you with your regulations, and please don't over-regulate.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak, did not have a chance to sign up? Leslie's going right past. Is there anyone online, clerk?
No, Mayor.
Thank you all for taking the time to sit in, weigh in, and speak to this last agenda item. Attorney Foote, can you bring it back? Thank you. So we're looking for two pieces of direction, and I guess anything else trustees want to address on this. And the direction, I'll go back to my previous page, was regarding informed consent, and you had one other one?
I think maybe just some general thoughts about the air quality regulations. I don't know if I have a specific ask on that because I'm still trying to digest the COGA feedback in particular. But roughly the choice would be, one could just defer to the state regulations. And it is the case that the state regulations have gone through several recent rulemakings, and they're likely to go through rulemakings in the future as well. So I affirm that that's happened. However, there have been a number of local governments that have not found those to be sufficient. Going back to the Erie and Broomfield examples, there were still a number of resident issues with emissions and air quality that both of those towns sought to address through regulations they put into place. So that's the general choice. The industry feedback is asking the town to just defer to the state and their regulations. There have been a number of local governments that have not done that. They put in stronger air quality regulations than what the state has. So that would be the choice there. If you're interested in just going back, deferring to the state, or continuing to refine additional regulations or more protective regulations than the state, that would be the choice there. And then the other would be look into or perhaps implement an informed consent exception to the 2,000-foot setback.
Okay, thank you. And then is this kind of Koga's final paragraph here, regarding, well, sorry, just to kind of tie in Koga of their letter, their final paragraph is talking about the draft regs.
The final paragraph is also talking about the air regulations.
Air regs, and then they're asking what is, how many times, what is kind of the triggers?
Right.
This is kind of referring to that, right, your questions?
Right, I believe they're pointing out just what they consider to be ambiguous terms that are in the regulations, which we could continue to refine or further define. That was part of what we did in the air regs as a result of the API feedback. I mean, API basically said when it came to air regs that, first of all, we want you to defer to the state, but if you're not gonna do that, then here's areas that need to be improved, further defined, that are ambiguous in our opinion. And so what I did when coming up with revisions based on that feedback was try to further define or further clarify those areas that they consider to be ambiguous, but not just scrap it and go with the state.
I personally, as this trustee, appreciates that. I guess we could just go down the line. I guess from my opinion, I don't know what we'd have to set some kind of what is more restrictive to the state. And I just have no idea, not being a specialist on this.
Well, certainly, in order to aid that, I could perhaps come up with some more information and maybe break the regulations down and say this is what the state does, this is what this regulation would do, and you could do a comparison that way. I don't think I could go down regulation by regulation and tell you with 100% certainty, this is where it's more protective, this is where it's the same, and et cetera, at least at this point.
So that's something that could come back by March 22nd? Or
I think the 26th is the next meeting.
26th,
but,
sorry.
Yes.
Well, when's the next time you're planning on coming in?
The 26th.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so I would think, in order to, I mean, clearly this is an area that still needs to be looked into. And so, you know, obviously, there would be additional analysis and that could be sent to you all.
Or maybe another thing is to just provide your judgment on that and you could come with a draft. I'm totally winging it here, so.
Well, I mean, you know, Erie and Broomfield, you know, their situation in terms of air quality, I think there's a reason they even pursued it. I think even just, you know, taking a look at that does it seem reasonable for making sure that, you know, we're keeping people healthy and safe without being overly restrictive, but keeping things at least above board so that we can keep people healthy, because it is farmland out here. It does affect other things. So I think maybe even using that as an example of like, well, this is what they did, we can also go to the state. That might help kind of keep things, I guess, between the bumpers.
I keep thinking back to that presentation we had on the guy that did the air quality
Detlef?
mapping, yeah. It was quite an eye-opener on how much drift happens.
So would it be okay if Attorney Foote kind of took a professional stab at this and came back?
Yep.
Okay.
What he's here for.
Does that work?
So, yes, I just need to be clear, what is your ask? What are you expecting?
I guess I'm looking.
Further information?
Well, just the ambiguity points that they were bringing up in that last piece of like, what is sampling size? How is frequency? What is bottling? What is a trigger? All of these things. And I mean, I guess my point was like maybe bounce it off of what Erie and Broomfield do in terms of like, this is what they found to be a good kind of medium point for working with oil and gas.
Yeah, I think there is some, I think there is some merit in at least some of how they're phrasing some of their questions. What is the trigger? What is a significant emission source?
I guess just ultimately take that last paragraph, formulate a good explanation as to what we're explaining so we can better understand both sides.
And there could be proposed revisions that come out of that as well. I'm assuming that you would be open to considering those. If, so not just give an explanation, but say, okay, well, in this case, they have a point, so maybe we can revise the regulation to address that particular point of feedback. And that was the process that we used for the API feedback.
And then the other one is regarding, I keep forgetting the word, implied consent or informed consent. And I guess I have a question regarding that. How do you, what is informed? Does that mean someone's coming into the door with neutral information and saying we need to sit down and talk this over? Or is it an email or?
The way that, there's nothing set in stone about how to do that, but the way the ECMC does it is that or the way that the ECMC encourages operators to do it is they have a pretty standard form that lays out what's going on, their rights, responsibilities, and there is, for example, a 2,000-foot setback, but it can be waived if you give informed consent for it to be waived. So it explains it, and that's a form that the operator is encouraged to give to the homeowner or the tenant or whoever's affected there. And then if they sign, they're giving their consent for the setback to be less than 2,000 feet.
So it can go to a tenant too. So if you're renting, it's not to the business owner or the structure owner, it's to the occupant.
You could draw up the regulations so that the tenant and the building owner would have to give informed consent, or one or the other. But I think that it's important to include the tenant because the tenant's the one that's living there.
Sure.
That would
Yeah.
have the effects of whatever's there.
How are you feeling that?
No, I think it needs to be considered. I think the only question I had was, are there any hard, like, to your expertise, do you know of any hard lines with like informed consent? There's an absolute minimum, meaning you know, 20 feet, there's a property line and they're putting an oil derrick right there. Like, we do not allow, regardless, you're within this range, you don't even get that as an option, is too close to habitable buildings or what have you. Is that a thing that you're aware of?
Yes. It varies. Those jurisdictions that do informed consent, many of them say, if not all of them say, that at a certain distance, you can't even give informed consent. So it could be 500 feet, it could be 1,000 feet, where you can't even give informed consent. It's just not going there. I just don't know exactly if the ECMC is 1,000 feet off the top of my head, or maybe it's probably 1,000, but I just couldn't tell you for sure. I don't think it goes below 1,000.
Okay.
There's no way to have informed consent less than 1,000. Trustee Chris?
Yeah, I just have a kind of a clarifying question, because the spatial scale, just based off of some of the comments, I thought there might be some confusion on the scope of our regulations, and so it is for the town limits, right? And not necessarily the growth management area or anything outside of it. It is the town of Berthoud, and if I remember your last presentation, it is primarily, essentially gonna mostly regulate the boundary that's out towards I-25 because of all the development that has occurred in our, I guess, old town area and the surrounding neighborhoods.
I think that's all correct. Yeah, it only applies to the town. You only have jurisdiction over the town. So it could be the case that there could be a new facility that would be in, say, Well County that's right across the border from the town, where you would not have jurisdiction to affect that. Although at the state agency at ECMC, you would have the ability as a proximate local government to participate in the discussion.
Sure.
But the local regulations would only apply to what's within town limits. And yes, it is the case that the eastern part, the Well County part is less developed, so these would more likely come to play in that part of the town rather than, it's not likely that you're gonna put a new oil and gas location in downtown Berthoud or downtown any town because there's so many structures that are there already.
That's what I was kind of driving at, and yeah, just like I said, based off of some of the comments, it seemed like maybe folks were thinking it was a bigger spatial area, or maybe I read too much.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
One of them lives in the county, it seems like.
Yeah.
Questions? Trustee Ayers, then we go to Murphy.
Yeah, so I would like your guys' feedback a little bit more on the informed consent, which obviously these are people's personal property, right? So based on other comments I've made in other situations, I think it would be hypocritical of me to say that, okay, who cares, right? Because it's their property, if they have informed consent within the specific guidelines of, you said around 1,000 feet, just because that's the state guideline, right? If it's within that, it doesn't matter. So I'm okay with that, but some of your comments a second ago, now I'm concerned that if it's informed consent of the landowner versus informed consent of the landowner and or tenants, because I foresee, and I'm not trying to discount the people who are actually living on the property. If it's a tenant, obviously I'm concerned about their health and well-being as well, in their opinion. But if there's a tenant that happens to be living there, that is living there when these asks come around and then they're gone 6 months later, well, now someone who is a tenant for 6 months has completely denied someone's ability to use their property in perpetuity, but they're leaving. They're not gonna be living there. But right now, they don't want it to happen, so they didn't sign off on it. That's a negative. We're moving on. That well is declined. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's why I'm concerned about
Having the occupant.
having it, the tenant, if it is a tenant and not a property owner who's renting the space. And once again, I'm not trying to limit the tenant's, need for protections, but I am also, if I'm going to agree with informed consent, I'm doing that based on the fact that this is someone's private property and the use of that private property is their choice as long as it's within the guidelines. And so I don't think that it's necessarily fair for someone who is potentially a short-term tenant to dictate how they use their property in the long term.
Yeah.
Risk of getting
That's a
evicted.
fair point, yeah.
It is. I wonder if there's a way around that, saying that the informed consent has to be given to the tenant or the occupant if they're going to be there at the time of the operation.
Yeah.
Sure, or
And that's
maybe-
hard to say unless you give a lease and stuff like that.
Right, maybe if it's like a 5 or 10 year lease or something, then that adds something different. I don't wanna, open
Yeah.
Pandora's box there, but
Yeah.
that's my concern.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, and it's a great point, cause you want the occupant or the tenant to be able to speak up since it's their lives, but if they're not even gonna be there,
Well, usually a lot of those are kind of working relationships, it's like a contract, cause they're a tenant because they're a tenant farmer. They're contracted to work there for however long the agreement is. But could there be something that would protect their rights as a tenant if the landowner says yes? Are there rights that they could, take that would protect them from being evicted or being able to get out of a lease without penalty or
Yeah, like if they
that
want
sort
to
of
say-
thing? But that's a whole other different law
Yeah.
book right there, so.
I don't think we get to regulate that, but that's
Yeah.
where my mind, that's
That's
where
another
my
year,
mind
Mike,
went.
on how to do that.
Bond or
I've been fairly happy not to have to practice landlord-tenant law, so. I see where you're going with that, trustee Ayers particularly. Perhaps when I go and take a look at, some of the other regs and, think about it a little bit more, I might be able to present some kind of options there. But nothing comes to the top of my mind at the moment.
Sorry to put that on you.
No, it's okay, it's, it makes sense,
He's an attorney, he's used to it.
yeah, it's a great point. After that, I guess I personally would like to wait on your research on that. I was very much in for this informed consent. I think that's great if everyone has to speak up in favor. But this trustee Ayers has a great point about if the person's not even there,
Right.
they get to feed in on
Right,
it.
and that's the issue, right, is that I agree with the informed consent of the property owner, but I don't think that's necessarily fair to them, depending on the contract that they've signed with that tenant.
So we're all okay with Attorney Foot looking into this further?
Look into it a little bit further and come up with.
The delight is in the details, so.
And Trustee Murphy?
Just to clarify and just one more comment, just if you could look into, the uphill water bodies and just investigate, just kinda, is there any kind of carve outs or anything like that? And just taking a look at the API letter in your memorandum, I thought that was really helpful to break down kind of how to address that point by point. And if we could get something for the COGA letter as well, that would be perfect.
Okay.
that work for everyone?
Yeah, actually, no, I have a follow-up
Trustee
question.
Ayers.
So the carve out for the downhill grading for the water, would that be something under the substantial equivalency protection, or would that be a separate issue just specifically dealing with water as far as you're concerned?
I don't know, I want some time to take a look at that particular criticism and with the feedback, to be able to give you some more details about that, I apologize.
No problem. Great, I think you did, yeah, a lot of stuff to cover, so, thank you. Anything else, board? I think we have an ordinance here, do we?
Nope.
No, we
just
don't,
direction.
yeah, just direction. Okay, well, is the direction pretty clear to you?
The direction's clear, and so, I'm assuming the timeline is the same where you're hoping to get this done as quickly as we can, which would mean that, so procedurally, I guess we can talk about this with staff later, but procedurally, present another draft by the 26th, and then would that then be the first reading, or is that the second reading? I'm just not clear about
Well, it's a great point, cause I cut off Mayor Pro Tem, cause I saw the ordinance 1336, but yeah, this is direction, so I did cut you off. We're not proposing or introducing anything tonight, right?
No, I think this was an opportunity to present the complete regulatory kind of framework, that ordinance, to get feedback, to kind of do everything you did tonight, and then we can bring back additional information based on all the conversation this evening at a future meeting.
So the 26th, would that have an ordinance for a first reading on it?
It could, but I think, I mean, I think it's just a timeline.
Guess we'll leave it up to you, if you feel like you can handle that.
If you, I mean, obviously, if you have a reason for it needing to be done by the 26th, then certainly I could do that, although, there's a bit on the to-do list, so it'd be rushed.
I don't see a need, does anyone else? Okay.
I'd rather.
My only timeline concern is
A new board,
changing.
yeah, new trustees, potentially, or new mayor, but that might fit. Industry might favor that, I don't know. I don't see a rush. I think whoever it is, I think the ultimate goal here is that give you enough leeway and time to make excellent decisions.
Okay, so, right, okay. That sounds good. And then I think in that case, we might need a little bit more time than the 26th, because really with the 26th, that means that you all need to have something in by, say, the 21st or 22nd to be able to review it. That's next week.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Right. So, it
So,
would be.
yeah,
at
no
some point
no
after.
deadline on that, I guess we could have it into April.
Okay, yeah, I'll try not to let it slide
April, May,
till,
yeah.
August or something. No, I won't, I'm just kidding. But since this has been going on for so long, it's time to, I would imagine it's time to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes our regular meeting. We're gonna go into executive session after reports. We won't be taking any action tonight, Administrator Kirk, that's correct?
That's correct.
So we can move on to reports, and for those in the audience, for all intents and purposes, after reports, the meeting will be over because we'll adjourn from executive session. So we'll start off with Trustee Ayers. You're getting hit tonight.
Yeah, I have a couple things, and Administrator Kirk, I apologize, I could have asked you this through email, but I completely forgot to send it out. In the port committee last week, the main question that they had for staff regarding the discussions on pools is the different phases of park to be named soon hereafter. Is there a reason, and is there a reason that the water feature, which was in phase 3, could not replace the 2 smaller ball fields in the northeast corner during phase 1? Is it monetary, or is it structural, or is it construction? And if there isn't a completely obnoxious reason that it couldn't be done monetarily or timeline, could that be an option to put forward in the planning process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't wanna be declarative, without really, but just off the top of my head, we're at about 60% design phase, which means there's been a lot of engineering work done, to accommodate kind of the phasing, that we've been pursuing based on all the previous master planning work and whatever, but, I think it would require fairly significant and comprehensive redesign of the site, which may be cost prohibitive, but I think that's kind of, cost prohibitive is a relative term, so I think it depends on kind of what the board's appetite is to do that. The total design fee just for the park itself is over $2 million, so I would suspect that we'd be going back pretty significantly in the design at this point. But it's not that it can't be done, it just costs money.
That was their main question, thank you. And that for the board, that was the main topic of the last board meeting last week, was basically the same presentation that we had of the different parks around town. And then for the board, I have recently been into contact with a gentleman from the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. And I was wondering if you all would be willing to possibly set an agenda item to meet with him to give a presentation. There's a proposal that would increase the size of double trucks as well as single trucks by upwards of 10, 15, 20,000 pounds and 10 or 15 feet. And the information that I have, which I can forward to you guys just as information, some of the major points that were brought up about why this is a negative impact on especially smaller communities is that with 11,000 pounds and 10 or 15 feet, it increases transfer truck stopping distances by somewhere along the lines of 30 feet at speed, which increases, I think there was a study done by the transportation department or some of the sheriff's office that it said it would increase the fatalities on highways and interstates by around 11%. Developments of infrastructure would be negatively affected because roundabouts are built to spec based on current maximums for trucks, and the extra weight and the extra length would cause infrastructure damage, which according to the proposed bill, as far as I understand it, would be up to the municipalities to foot, which is interesting. Alleyways as well. Yeah, so cost of infrastructure, public safety, and the support of, it seems like, a fair number of law enforcement and public safety institutions. So with that information, would you guys be willing to maybe have him contact us and maybe give a presentation? His interest was either individually or as a board, if we could give some sort of feedback or comment of either support or not. And if you guys are not willing to do that as a board, I
Does he
could let him
want
know
us
as
to just
well.
write a letter in support, or is he wanting
Basically,
to?
he's wanting a letter of
As a
support,
single
and so
advance.
he's looking to give us a presentation as to why we should or yeah.
Is this
Additional
something that could-
presentation seems.
No, and so I'm asking are you as a board willing to get that presentation with no expectation one way or another of writing a letter of consent?
Could we send them with email?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and that was the comment, right, is I was gonna get feedback from you guys and then I was gonna contact him and see.
If it could be handled by email, that would be fine, if we've got room on an agenda.
How long do you think the presentation would be?
I talked to him for 20 minutes tops and we were talking about other stuff besides just the presentation.
I'm fine with it. I don't agree with the guy, but I totally feel like we need to hear him out. He's been emailing me for.
Oh, has he?
Yeah. Just after responding, because I don't agree with him, but he probably has some good
Sounds
points.
like it can't be an email then.
No, well, we talked about the MPO last week too briefly, but no, I totally support it. I mean, he's got good points too. I'm not just make truck trains, but anyway. Yeah. Is anyone against that? Hearing him out? 20, 30, tell him 20, 30 minutes and then 15 minutes for Q&A?
Well, if you guys are okay with it, I'm gonna send him an email and ask him to contact administrator.
Yeah,
or
just-
set up an agenda.
He actually already has contacted me, I have a meeting, a short phone call with him scheduled, I think tomorrow, so.
Oh, great. Well, maybe I'll feed you my questions and you can answer them. So. I think there's some environmental considerations around.
Maybe we could put it on Administrator Kirk to determine
When it comes to letters of support for political issues, I don't typically make determinations about where that's appropriate, but
Cool.
yeah, I'm happy to work with the board. If you guys wanna schedule that for a future meeting, I would suggest that we not do that on the 26th. We have a very
Yeah.
heavy agenda that night already.
Well, shoot, this is in session right now? Is this a bill right now?
It's in a spending bill or I think an upcoming spending bill.
If it's time sensitive, I suggest does an email.
I'll contact him.
We can't really vote on an email.
Yeah, once again, I'm not
I know you're not.
suggesting one thing or another, I just wanted to run it
Yeah, yeah.
before to see if we could get
Yeah, so let's have, Administrator Kirk, if you could, when you're on your phone call with him, maybe we could schedule a time.
Yeah.
I don't know when the session ends, I think it's May. but-
Yeah, I'll get some better understanding from him and I'll just shoot an email out. If there's a time crunch and if you guys respond back, yes, you wanna put it on the agenda or no, you don't. As you guys know, our kind of rule is 3 or more trustees and we'll put it on the agenda, so I can send you guys out the information after our phone call. I checked, it's not tomorrow, it's Thursday, so I apologize, but
Cool.
anyway, if there's a time crunch, I'll let you guys know.
Thank you. The only other thing is thank you Administrator Kirk for the email about the roundabouts over on I-25. I drove by the other day and the rocks are looking really nice. They're set into some little thin concrete and everything's looking good.
Awesome. Trustee Kurtz?
No reports.
Okay, Trustee Hardy?
Just a couple questions. First off, I'd like to thank Ann and Administrator Kirk and oh god, I forgot their names already. The two gentlemen. Yes.
Martin and Jerry.
I almost said Tom and Jerry, but Martin, Jerry, for letting me participate as much as I was allowed to in dealing with the new current sign code tonight. I really appreciate being able to participate in that. I also wanted to bring up Nebraska stop signs. Any new updates on that?
We are working to collect data on speeds out there, so we can have some kind of objective criteria for evaluating whether or not those are appropriate based on all the data we collect. So we have a speed monitoring device that is not super clear and obvious. It's not like the radar trailer, so it doesn't impact typically people's willingness to drive fast. And so we can collect data and get a good idea of what the 85th percentile looks like in terms of speeds through that area, and then determine whether or not we think there's an appropriate.
Does it like tell you time of day, like, you know?
It collects really specific data.
Okay, so it's by the minute or by the hour or whatever. Okay. Cool, thanks for the update on that. The other thing is I did watch the candidates forum the other night and pretty interesting questions and comments. But there was one that towards the end, I believe it was, God, I can't remember because I had to split it up into 2 videos, where one of the citizens requested that the new candidates sign a pledge of some sort. And I
Pledge of
immediately.
respect.
Yeah, pledge of respect is what he called it, yes. But wanted to just kind of bring that forward that we've already kind of done that about 5 years ago with our code of conduct that Maureen and I worked on, and Mike as well. So Mike you were kind of a part of that,
I was.
weren't you?
No.
No?
I mean, I'll take the credit,
Oh,
but I
I'm thinking
didn't.
something, I'm thinking
Can't you
something
tell by
else,
the way
never
he
mind.
acts? So disrespectful.
No, but anyway, Maureen and I know.
Yeah, I thought of that. I wrote, yeah, anyway, that's it.
So anyway, just wanted to bring that up, make it.
We do have code of
remind
conduct.
everybody publicly or as citizens or even our own board that
Yeah.
we do have that, kind of that pledge, I guess, sort of.
Yeah.
So,
I don't mean to jump in your report, but I thought it was an interesting question because I've always found the board to be fairly respectful. I know that there's maybe a history of it not being respectful.
what he was referring to.
It's referred to because I got censored for about a week until that wasn't gonna happen, and Tim actually jumped in and said we need a
Okay.
let's just do a code of conduct, and things got a lot better after that.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to bring that back up, but there wasn't really anything else major in the forum that night that I wanted to address tonight, but
Cool.
anyway. But yeah, that is, I believe, all I've got.
Awesome.
So for big thanks, and thanks for the email, Chris, on all the cool projects. It's been a while since I've driven out to I-20 with, I was like, gosh, when was the last time I drove out there? I don't go east very much anymore, but anyway, now I kind of might drive out there and drive around the roundabout a couple times to check it out.
A lot has changed, so
Maybe I'll cruise
you
out
should
there with
definitely
my
go check
bike.
it out.
It's nice, so.
Awesome. Trustee Murphy.
Again, I'd like to thank staff, like, getting that email today was awesome. I had a whole bunch of questions and that took most of them away, so I certainly appreciate the work that's going on, at all levels. Wanted to bring up a few things. I was wondering if we could get an update on cemetery status, at some point soon. Let's see, water graphics on the website, can we get that updated?
Yeah, we still need to put the water supply memo up that we,
Okay.
that was on my list and I didn't deal with it, so.
All good. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was, the energy cohort. I sent an email to all of y'all, just kind of regarding where we're at. The funding is dried up for this cohort, since last year, but we still have a discussion group basically going on right now. They're trying to find additional funding sources, right now through the Denver Regional Council of Governments. I've been an observer for Berthoud, during that time, and my request would be fully fledged support in asking for these funding requests on behalf of the town. If there is any money involved, obviously I'll bring that up to you guys. This right now is just mainly support in name only, for participation in this cohort, which still involves most of the governments south of us right now. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Is anyone opposed to that, I should say, or any questions? I personally think it makes sense. There seemed like there's not $1,000 ask right now. It might be
No,
around that.
that's been in the past, but
Yeah,
right
I-
now it's just a discussion group basically.
I think it's brought up some great points already, that cohort, so. Yeah, all right.
Any
Yeah,
comments
good
from
report.
staff or?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. That's all I've got right now.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Youth Advisory is gonna be hopefully interviewing a couple new prospective applicants tomorrow, as well as, I guess they were going to be finishing up their ideas for scholarship funding. Essentially, I'll be working hopefully either with staff or Cindy or somebody with what they've come up with on what that looks like. The rules they're setting for it, essentially to kind of incentivize people to join Youth Advisory as a volunteer position, stuff like that. I also have two people in Youth Advisory who are interested in being liaisons to port and planning. So I told them, go to the website and email them, and we'll see if that actually has happened yet, but I can get you guys in touch with them. Yeah, they'd love to be a part of that. Yeah, I guess the only other questions I've got would be the usual railroad stuff, CDOT stuff, you know. I only have a couple more of these meetings, Chris. I gotta get them.
Oh, you'll be in the back. You'll be Lynn.
Yeah, he'll be sitting with Lynn. The railroad crossing in Mountain, Keith Knoll, our Public Works Operations Manager, met with CDOT and the railroad this week, I think yesterday. To kind of go through their plans for construction, and improvement to that crossing, so I haven't gotten an update from him yet on kind of how that meeting went, but that to me is a good sign that they're still planning to do something this spring like they previously committed to, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe I shouldn't say this because it's I don't know that I have specifics, but Keith felt like they were already kind of working backwards from what they had originally intended to do. But maybe maybe that's unfair. Like I said, I haven't got the download from the meeting yesterday, so.
I guess railroad crossing over mountain, still planning on spring or summer.
Sorry, that was the one I was referring to.
Okay, they're supposed to be spring, summer, but that seems to be kind of eroding.
No, I think they're they seem to be moving forward.
Okay.
The fact that they had kind of a pre-construction meeting with us and with CDOT and railroad representatives is a good sign they're expecting to make some improvements. They were working with Keith on a detour route because they'll have to close the crossing, likely go down 2nd Street to Welch and then up 3rd back to Mountain, which we've done in the past when that crossing's been closed. So those are all good signs that progress is happening.
Okay, no, that's awesome. I guess the Spartan crossing, That one still on track for sometime this
Uh,
year?
Yeah, potentially. We still have to go through the PUC process. We're hoping to get some things ironed out with the railroad before we submit that application. And I've mentioned before, we have an attorney who's kind of a specialist in railroad issues who's working with us. I believe he's been recently in contact with Aaron and Brian in my office. So just trying to get a couple of things worked out. If we can't do that with the railroad, we can just go ahead and submit our application to PUC.
I guess just last question, making sure the trail from Hammond Farms south into Vantage and that's still on track for spring, summer of 2024 to get done and completed, or?
It is expected to be constructed this summer.
Hammond, okay.
Yeah.
From Water Avenue north to Tenney.
This summer, awesome.
Good, that's all I've got.
Awesome. First, I just wanted to say, I played pickleball both indoor and outdoor. And I just want to say from the pickleball community, I heard very positive things about staff. Not like I was going around asking, but it's been very complimentary of some adjustments needed to be made that Amanda and staff have gone out of their way. So if you're not hearing it from them, I wanted to just say thank you. I hope you're hearing it from them. I know.
I appreciate that. I
They can
don't
be
know
rowdy
that we've
sometimes.
gotten that same feedback, so that's good.
Okay, well, good. Well, I don't know who I was talking to. I don't even know their name, but they're saying, no, they're great to work with.
That's great.
I played outdoor and it was amazing. So pretty awesome. We have such a facility in Berthoud. And that's without even having the coating in place yet. So just playing on hard concrete. It's amazing out there.
I
So,
think that coating is scheduled for late April. so-
okay. And apparently the pickleballers were, the group was saying that they're not gonna play on as a group out there yet until it's on there or something. They're trying to help out staff, but I played on it.
Yeah,
You know, there's
it's open. There's
okay.
the courts were full this evening at about 6 o'clock. So
Okay, and I played over the weekend and there was a group catty corner to me and I could overhear them and they were just talking about how awesome it was too, so.
nice.
Kudos to staff, kudos to the board for putting out something awesome. Can't believe I'm playing now, but
Team
I'm one of the crew now and I didn't mean to. I got hooked.
Make sure you stretch.
Amateur tennis, yeah.
Don't blame me.
I forgot to forward this off, but our MPO meeting, we discussed a lot of the current pending transportation legislation. Particularly, we discussed the transit-oriented communities proposed, some requirements. Don't really affect Berthoud, we're not at that population. Affects the larger communities on really how you build, where you build, and what kind of funding incentives you'll get. But I'll forward that along with some other interesting transportation. One of them was that, you know, there's talk about having a law coming up about motorcycles being able to filter or motorcycles traffic going under 20 mile per hour, motorcycles can drive in between the vehicles. I was the contrarian to the group, being a motorcyclist, and then thought about it later and I was like, this is a really dumb idea. So anyway, some of this interesting stuff I'll forward out, but a lot of transportation legislation going on right now. The only question I had was I got tagged on a Facebook post around trash at the new site of Pioneer Park. Is that's town ran or is that an HOA ran? They were just saying that they found some alcoholic bottles on the court and the lady was really mad that her son was about to play there and they couldn't find a trash can. I didn't go out.
That park isn't complete yet. It is kind of open because I don't think there's any safety issues associated with the playground or anything like that. We're still actually trying to finalize who's going to be responsible for maintenance, whether it's the town or the HOA. It's kind of a long story, but the town is the owner of the park. The HOA actually was intending to maintain it. The design of the park was enhanced by the town. We added the playground and then we were going to add a pickleball court and some other issues. But the irrigation system is tied into the HOA's irrigation system, which is an oversight, I think, by the town's engineering team.
So the trash pickup.
It's a long story.
We don't know who's gonna do that yet.
Right now, the HOA or the developer is maintaining the park. We can work on getting
I'll forward you
trash
the
can
post,
out there,
yeah.
and I mean,
Seems kind of reasonable.
that kind of stuff's pretty easy to handle, I think.
Cool. Other than that, Ann, you're still here. I was on our Dark Sky meeting again today, our update, and the Dark Sky professional was so complimentary of what you've done for dark sky sign codes. They said once we get into the running for our designation officially, this could be complete by next summer, but they're gonna use the town of Berthoud's signs for the international model for communities. They said that you really have no more work to do on the sign front. It's so well done.
Cool.
So.
Brian,
Team effort, but I think you're leading it. Brian's awesome too. I'm not discounting it, but I really wanted to thank you for that. They otherwise, can be kind of picky and they're gonna come in and inspect things and help us out too with a lot of things. But as far as our sign code, which seems to trip up a lot of people, they just said it was outstanding, so thank you.
Cool.
That's it. Thanks. Turn it over to Steph.
I only have one more update for you tonight, and that is that we received word from Senator Hickenlooper's office that the
We're getting a train station.
Unfortunately, that is not what they told us, but
Pony for everybody.
the federal fiscal year 2024 minibus budget, they called it. I guess it's not an omnibus. I don't know what a minibus is, but finally passed Congress this week. The federal fiscal year started last October, so just a side note. But the legislation did include appropriations from a variety of subcommittees, including congressionally directed spending requests, of which you may recall we had an $864,000 microtransit grant that was included in that bill. And so with the passage of the minibus bill, but we're waiting on the president's signature. But once that happens, there will be press release and other things. But it does look like we're going to get the grant for our microtransit pilot program through that congressionally directed spending. So that's exciting.
Sometime.
It's been a long time coming, but big thanks to Senator Hickenlooper's office.
It's
And
awesome
Senator
that the
Hickenlooper
microtransit
and
is coming out of the minibus.
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's kind of
we get a
funny.
minibus out of the minibus. So
We
we don't know a timeline yet though.
Micro or minibuses?
We do not. We understand that they expect the president to sign that bill soon, and then we'll get some additional guidance from the agency that will be administering our CDS funding, which should be the Department of Transportation. So yeah. So we don't have all the details yet, but I think we're finally at the second to last step in the process, at least of getting the funding approved, and then we'll have to go through federal grant processes as well. But Congresswoman Caraveo was a big help in her office in getting that done, as was Senator Hickenlooper. So anyway, we'll see how all that pans out.
Did you see the emails about the upcoming one? Caraveo had some workshops.
We did.
Do you have any ideas?
We batted a couple of ideas around internally. I don't know that we have anything kind of prepared and ready to go in the same way that we did with the microtransit program, because we had just finished that transit feasibility analysis. And so we had a lot of really good, very recent backup and public participation, other things. I don't know that we have anything that looks like that might qualify for a federal grant, but we're looking at a couple of ideas.
That'd be great. I mean, even if we just threw something out there that's not like an underpass. I know Meade got a pedestrian underpass underneath I-25. I mean, I think there's some pretty impressive stuff we could look at.
Yeah, and that one was one of the ideas that we talked about on underpass to 287.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Anything else?
Nothing else for me tonight.
Attorney Smith?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Sergeant Williamson, I just thought it might be good to include law enforcement in these. Do you have any pressing updates or anything?
No, sir.
Looked like we had some good citizen interventions over the last week regarding some serious crashes. So it's pretty cool that our citizens and county citizens are stepping up. Thank you guys for all you do too. Okay, at this time, anyone like to move us into executive session? Afterwards, we can take a 5-minute break and then go into our executive session room. Any of the trustees like to move us into that?
I'm happy to. Should we also move to spend?
Yes, let's do that first.
One second. Where is it? I thought
So I
was
move to
ready.
go into executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing a strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators pursuant to CRS section 24.6.4024EI, following provided for informational purposes, First Street sewer easements. And
Second.
oh, the second one. to go into executive session, oh, that's because I'm reading off this sheet. And to conference with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024B, following provided for informational purposes, potential litigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem has moved on executive session. Trustee Ayers has seconded. Clerk, may we roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you tonight for the audience.
You gotta do the time.
Yes, let's do that time one real quick.
So I'll move to extend tonight's Town of Berthoud Board of Trustees meeting to 10:30.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move it to 10:30. Thank you.
Let me turn off.
Better for them. I bet you did, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Send it.